Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We made it. We made it through another week. And I have to tell you guys, I want to start off this week's happy hour with something that's a little bit special because this isn't just any Friday for me. This is a Friday that is the 10-year wedding anniversary with my husband. I'm spending a couple hours with you guys, but we are going to be going out for an awesome steak dinner later. I'm very, very happy about this. I wanted to just show you guys just some pictures from my life. This is actually my wedding. I didn't wear like a real wedding dress or anything. We got married at a log cabin in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. 10 years ago today, actually probably almost exactly 10 years ago today, because the wedding actually started around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if I recall. My wedding was awesome. It was my favorite. Like, I have no regrets about my wedding at all. But here are some other pictures from the 10 years of my marriage. This is Victor and I at a show for a band in Boston at the Wilbur Theater back in the day. Victor didn't really like the music. Like, the music is not Victor's thing. The music was more my thing. Was like one of my favorite bands, and of course he came with me. This is Victor and I on the Boston Marathon course in 2015. And the fun story behind this picture is that this was like right before Heartbreak Hill. I ran the Boston Marathon in 2014 and 2015. Victor crashed the course in 2015 and ran like 8 miles with me because I got hurt really badly during training. I was severely undertrained. And so the funny part about this is like right before Heartbreak Hill. And what you don't see in this picture is Victor like dragging me up Heartbreak Hill saying, "Carlin, you can have all the beer you want when you finish." I was like not happy. This is Victor and I in Puerto Rico. This is Victor and I from from Hampton Beach in just a cheesy photo booth. This is Victor and I in St. Kitts on a train that goes around the island of St. Kitts where they have a lot of monkeys. This is Victor and I snorkeling in St. Martin's. This is Victor and I snorkeling in Turks and Caicos. We like snorkeling in the Caribbean. We do. And this is Victor and I running I think this was like the BAA 10K or something back in the day. And of course, finally, us at the Walkaway Rally last year. 10 years with my husband today. I cannot even tell you guys how fast 10 years of marriage goes. I cannot believe it. But I definitely weren't married well. I have no regrets. He is definitely the person that I'm supposed to spend my life with in this particular lifetime. But you guys didn't come to hear me reminisce about my anniversary. That's not what you came for. We came, as we do every single week, on Friday at 3 p.m. to watch woke training, to possibly drink, and to make fun of it. And to talk about what it means, because that's what happy hour is about. Listen, I don't like getting my information just from journalists who frankly don't spend a lot of time investigating this stuff. I don't like getting my news from like headlines where they're going to inevitably pick the most outlandish thing they can possibly put. I like going to primary sources. And so every Friday on my channel, and I'm broadcasting in a bunch of different locations. I'm on my primary YouTube channel. I'm on my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke, because the reason is that happy hour next year is going to be moving to Actively Unwoke. So I want to just have a record of it on both channels so I don't have to like re-upload and stuff like that. I'm lazy. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Odyssey. I'm also on Rockfin. And every Friday at 3 p.m., we come together to watch a woke training exercise to see from the horse's mouth what these people are actually saying. So we don't need the news to interpret it for us. We don't need any of that. We want to know for ourselves what they are actually saying, and we want to be able to decode it and decipher it and talk about it and drink a little bit on the way. Now, the reason I bring up that it's my anniversary is that I'm probably not going to be drinking much today. I do have one beer. I have one beer. I have a Warlock, which is a pumpkin stout that I may bust open, but because I'm going out to a big fancy dinner with my husband later, and hopefully we'll be having some wine at the dinner, I don't want to get drunk pre-dinner and then go out to dinner. It's not good for my anniversary, man. But what I will say is that I do have some fancy juices. I've got some fancy juices. I got a smoothie that I might drink It's blueberry, strawberry, banana, lime, ginger, and chia. And I've got a green drink that I might drink, and I also have a lemony drink that I might drink. So I've got various drinks. We don't always have to drink alcohol at happy hour. Sometimes we can be a little bit more responsible. If you have something in your glass today, please chat it in. Let us know what you're drinking. Please make sure you mount that like button as we get started, because guys, we have a doozy of a training today. Today, I have been assured that this training is filled with all this training just took place a couple days ago, like last week. I have been assured that it is filled with all of the buzzwords that we hope to hear. I am sure that we might even get close to a blackout bingo on today's training called Critical Race Theory, Facing Our History, Freeing Our Future. I have no context for this training other than it was sent to me by someone who's like, Carlin, this training is batshit insane and has every single buzzword you could possibly imagine. This is going to be a great bingo training. I was like, yes, yes, let's do it. But before we jump in and get started, hang on. I have so many windows open on my desktop. We got a couple orders of business. Now, the first order of business is that my doing this sort of thing, watching trainings with you guys, deciphering trainings, helping everyone understand what these trainings mean and what they say and all that good stuff, that is only made possible because of my locals community. Now, YouTube helps as well. I'm not gonna front, but my locals community is the thing that allows me to stay independent, the thing that allows me to spend so much time looking into this stuff to make sure that I'm helping people to understand it. It's what allows me to spend time running around working with different parents groups, helping parents to understand it, which I don't really usually publicize that I do, but I actually do quite a bit. It's what allows me to spend my time doing all of this. Locals is the best place on the internet. It is the only place on the internet that I am not afraid to look at the comments, because I know that the people in locals, when they're making comments, it is a good faith effort. They want to be there. They want to be engaging in conversation. There's no shit posting. There's no trolling. It's just nice. It's so nice. Now, you can join my locals for free, kb.locals.com. It's scrolling by in the ticker. Or if you want to help me out and support what I'm doing, you'll want to become a monthly member. Now, you can become a monthly member on YouTube. And of course, I do appreciate all of my YouTube members. But in locals, for $5 a month, it's going to unlock all of the features of locals. So you're going to be able to get to comment on everything. You're going to be able to get access to 2 Zoom calls a week with me and the locals community. I typically spend about 6 hours a week on Zoom calls with my locals, where we're chit-chatting, shooting the shit, talking about what's going on in the news, supporting each other, all that good stuff. You get all that and a lot more for a monthly price of $5 a month, so less than you're going to pay for a cup of coffee at Starbucks. You can give more too if you want, but 5 is the minimum buy-in. You can do it for an annual price of $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free, or you can make a one-time gift. I love my locals community. I so greatly appreciate my locals community. You guys are the best. You guys are what keep me going. I couldn't do it without you. But the other thing I want to talk about is I wrote a book. At the beginning of the year. I actually really wrote it. I started kind of in like the February timeframe, but I really I finished it in July, essentially. So I wrote this book called Actively Unwoke: The Ultimate Guide for Fighting Back Against the Woke Insanity in Your Life, and it is now available on pre-sale on Amazon. Now, the hardcover version is on pre-sale right now. There will be a digital version. Don't worry, there'll be a digital. I don't know if there'll be an audio version yet. The publisher has to do whatever they do to decide whether they want to do that. But what would help them doing that is if we made this pre-sale as successful as possible. So if you are interested in fighting back against the woke, this is going to be a book that's going to help you out. This is not an intellectual book. I don't write into, if anyone has noticed, I'm not an intellectual. I don't write intellectual books. This is a book that is specifically geared towards normal people with real jobs to help them understand what is going on in the simplest possible terms and to give them actionable things that they can do to fight back. So the first part of the book is decoding the woke. Again, taking it and and I don't mean this in a bad way, but dumbing it down into the most simple, easiest to understand terms, because this is an incredibly complex thing. And average people with real jobs that have lives and kids and just want to hang out after work and don't want to spend all this time watching woke trainings, they need a simple guide. So I tried to provide that. I then wrote several chapters with real world case studies about how people have fought back against the woke and actionable things that anyone, doesn't matter if you have a platform, doesn't matter if you're on the school board. I gave people tips that any single one of you can use to fight back in your local community, because I think that this is where that battle is going to be fought. I've got a chapter on what to do if you're canceled. I've got a chapter on how to take care of yourself while you're fighting back against the woke. So that's what's in the book. I'm really excited about it. Actively Unwoke. I pinned the link to the top of the chat on YouTube. It's also in the description. And I'm really looking forward to that. Now, final thing is we got to get our bingo cards, because this is going to be Buzzword Bingo edition of Happy Hour. To get your bingo card, it is in the description of the stream. You can click on the link that'll take you over to the bingo site. You generate your bingo card. Every single bingo card is different. You get a free space in the middle. We're looking for lines for the first round, so you can get a straight line. You could also do the corners. If you get a bingo, you make sure you yell out bingo in the chat. You don't win a dang thing, but it's something that kind of keeps us engaged in the training, keeps us on our toes, makes sure we're paying attention to what's going on. Once we get a normal bingo, then we're going for blackout bingo. Now, no one, as of yet, in the many months that I have been doing woke bingo, no one has gotten a blackout bingo. No one's gotten a blackout yet. Maybe today will be the day. You let us know if it is. All right, who is ready to get started with our woke training for today? It's like an hour and 40 minutes. This is a long one. I hope we can make it through it before I have to get ready to go to dinner. Dinner's not till 7. I have basically 3 hours and 15 minutes before I have to leave. I hope we can make it through the training. All right, who's ready to go? Type yes into the chat if you're ready to get this party started. Let me look over on Odyssey. Let me look over on Rockfin to see what's going on there. You guys are ready to go too? George Andre Veloso Nunez says the Zoom calls are great. It's more than worth the subscription, even with high exchange rates. Is the ebook version available for pre-sale? Hard copies get too expensive with shipping and fees. Yeah, so he's talking about locals. Thank you, George. I appreciate that. I love having you on my local Zoom calls. The ebook is not available yet, but it will be. It's all going to come out on the same day. It's all going to come out in April. So you're not missing anything. It's just not, for some reason, past my understanding, it's not available yet. But it will be. Don't worry. It's coming. I will let you guys know when it's up. All right, let's get this party started. Critical race theory. Facing our history. Freeing our future. Let me just make sure I have my audio all set up here the way the audio should be set up, which I always forget to do before I go live. Always, every single time. All right, guys, you know the deal. Let me know if you can't hear the sound. Let's rock and roll.
Director of Global Citizen Circle. For almost 50 years, our organization has been gathering together people of diverse backgrounds, ages, ethnicities, religions, and opinions to talk with and listen to one another, and in so doing, to stimulate constructive change around issues of pressing concern locally, nationally, and globally.
Why do all their voices sound dead inside? They always sound dead inside. This woman's like, we are understanding each other. Common Cure says, thoughts on Dan Crenshaw and Trevor Noah's conversation on CRT? I haven't seen it. I had no idea that happened. Maybe I'll do a reaction to it though. What did you think? I had no idea this occurred, but I suspect I'm not a fan of Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw's running around saying we have to support Chris Sununu because New Hampshire is a blue state. New Hampshire's not a blue state. So Dan Crenshaw, while I'm open to being wrong, I suspect he doesn't know what the F he's talking about when it comes to critical race theory. I could be wrong. I will keep an eye out for it. Thank you, Common Cure, for letting me know about it.
Pre-pandemic, these conversations happened in person in New Hampshire, in Boston, in Washington, D.C., and in South Africa, Northern Ireland, and Cuba. While this past year and a half has been nothing we could have anticipated, nor would we have wished for, it has brought unexpected blessings. Connecting regularly with more people throughout the world has brought us closer during a time of distancing. A shared sense of purpose in fighting the pandemic, as well as racial injustice and inequity, and in building the world we want, has shown us how important it is to listen and learn from one another with open hearts and minds.
Doesn't she
More
sound
than
like she has an
ever,
open
we see
heart?
that there is a need for
With
the kind of
open
connection
hearts and
and
minds.
empathy Global Citizen Circle strives to build. I'm so pleased to welcome you all to the circle. The idea to do this circle on critical race theory was prompted by a conversation with Pierre Morton, Chief Diversity Officer at Franklin Pierce University, this past summer, when so many educators were looking to the next academic year with questions about what this critical race theory was all about and how its weaponization might impact their teaching. Since then, we've only heard more and more about CRT and laws being passed to stop the teaching of divisive issues. I want to thank Pierre and Franklin Pierce University for supporting this important.
Specifically of divisive. Did this take place in New Hampshire? Am I just not aware that this took place in New Hampshire? Because like Franklin Pierce is in New Hampshire. I think it's a New Hampshire thing. Huh. Okay. Yes. Specifically to stop divisive issues. Exactly. At least she's got that right.
Important and timely discussion. And I'd like to thank our partners, Social Change Initiative and Southern New Hampshire University.
That's why I got this. Yes, that's why I got this. Southern New Hampshire University sponsored this. Southern New Hampshire University is incredibly woke. They have a whole 5-year woke diversity plan. They have a whole woke dictionary. It's all on their website. That's why I got this. This is a New Hampshire thing. Okay, it's all coming back now. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, they either sound dead inside or condescending. Oh, man. Okay, let's keep going.
Their ongoing support of Global Citizen Circle. Today, we'll hear from our distinguished discussion leaders, Dr. Janet Dewart-Bell, a self-described layperson's perspective, and Professor Kendall Thomas, the views of a preeminent scholar of critical race theory.
A preeminent scholar of critical race theory is going to school us about critical race theory. Do you guys trust anyone that says they're a preeminent scholar of critical race theory? You basically became a preeminent scholar in something that you made up. It's like becoming a preeminent scholar of like like a fictional place of like what is the Lord of the Rings like. Oh God, I was never a Lord of the Rings person, but my father was probably a preeminent scholar in the Lord of the Rings universe, and we had this crap all over our house. And it's like, I understand, like, obviously people know that Lord of the Rings is a fictional piece, but people don't know that critical race theory is fake. It's like they became a preeminent scholar of something that is completely Middle Earth. Yes, it's like becoming a preeminent scholar of Middle Earth and not understanding that Middle Earth is a fictional realm that is not real. That's what it's like to be a preeminent scholar of critical race theory. It's like you became a preeminent scholar of Middle Earth without understanding that Middle Earth is not a real place.
But before we do, I'm so happy to introduce to you our moderator today, Tammy Tai, the Deputy Director of King Boston, a nonprofit working to create a living memorial and programs honoring the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King and their time and work together in Boston. When we heard just a few weeks ago that all of the staff working at King Boston were studying critical race theory, we thought, what a perfect opportunity to partner and invite Tammy to facilitate our discussion today. And we're so grateful she accepted. So before I turn over the virtual mic to Tammy and we hear from our discussion leaders, let me also say that we encourage interaction during and even after our programs. And if you have a question or comment, please type it into the chat. And once our discussion leaders have made their opening remarks.
The chat understands. Saying you are a preeminent scholar in critical race theory is like saying you got your degree from Hogwarts. It is a made up discipline. It is not real. They made it up. And they talked about it so much and this is like the very definition of manifesting. They talked about it so much like it was real. They thought about it like it was real. And in doing so, something that is complete and total fiction became a real thing. You don't believe in law of attraction. All you need to do is look at these people, because these people are like masters of the law of attraction. They believed a fake thing was real with every fiber of their being. And in believing it, they made it a real thing. But it is not real. And we need to be able to say that it's not real.
Tammy will call on you to unmute yourself, say your name and where you're from, and ask your question. So with that, I'll turn things over to you, Tammy.
Theo, thank you so much. I'm deeply honored to be in this space with you all. Tammy,
Where's
hi, my
Tammy?
pronouns are she, her.
She, her
from
pronouns.
The land of Massachusetts, in Massachusetts, Boston. So Theo, thank you, and welcome everyone to this circle conversation on critical race theory. I've got to say, a global audience for this discussion is just really exciting. I'm looking at the numbers.
You have a global audience.
People in this space, so thank you for carving out the time to be here.
Yes,
and I've got to say, I'm really excited, but also a bit awestruck for today's conversation, because we've got two of our legends here to help us unpack critical race theory, to understand what's behind the root of this recent backlash and weaponization here in the United States. We know that has reverberations all around the world, and where we might find hope as we look to critical race theory for designing and living into the kind of world where we all thrive, grounded in real joy.
You know where I find hope in critical race theory? I find hope in Virginia for critical race theory, where the Republicans won the governorship of Virginia, basically based on critical race theory and everyone's absolute hatred and disdain for it. That's where I find hope.
Joy and well-being. So I'm just going to invite everyone to join me in welcoming Dr. Janet Dwart-Bell and Professor Kendall Thomas. If you haven't found your reactions buttons yet in Zoom, send them a heart or a clap or like some confetti. I think that's just like a beautiful image on the screen there. But allow me to just introduce them, and then we're getting to get into conversation. So Dr. Bell is a social justice advocate, author, and dare I say, Dr. Bell, an all-around diva. She's the founder and president of Lead Intergenerational Solutions. She's the host of the forthcoming podcast, Leading Justice, coming out this November, and founder of the Derek Bell Lecture on Race in American Society at New York University School of Law, now in its 26th year. Professor Thomas is Nash Professor of Law at Columbia Law School, a teacher, scholar, activist, and artist. His seminal writing on an intersection of race and law appears in Critical Race Theory, the key writings that founded the movement, which he also co-edited. If you don't have it, here is the shameless plug to get the book. So I'd love to just welcome you both, and just to hear your voice and welcome you into the circle.
I think it would be fun if every time someone pimped a critical race theory book in one of these happy hours, if you guys just went ahead, if at least one of you who hasn't yet bought my book, just to counterbalance, just to bring balance to the universe. I'm only half joking about that. If you want to, it's pinned to the top of the chat right now. Muhammad says, speaking of fictional universe, they need to paint their critical race theory with red stripes to make it go faster. Comment in the chat if you know what I'm referring to. And George Andre Veloso Nunez says she should do something more useful with her time to have enough money to pay for a good internet connection. I live in a third world country and my video doesn't freeze on a Zoom call, especially if she's in Boston. There is really, if you live in Boston, there is absolutely no excuse for not having a proper internet connection. I'm sorry, please. Like, get it together. If we have to live on the internet, man, just like get a good, fast internet connection.
Both of you just unmute and just say hello. And I'd love to ask a question to help folks just to hear what's going on with you right in this moment. I'd love to hear from both of you, what's bringing you joy today? So Dr. Bell, maybe you just say a hello and what's bringing you joy today? And then Professor Thomas will go to you.
This gathering, I put in the chat, it's light and love, and the energy is just amazing, and the warmth. I love.
See, these people don't know what positive energy feels like. Because I'll tell you, like, I am extremely empathic. I can pick up energy in almost any situation, and sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. These people are like so cold and inauthentic. They're not as bad as the white identitarians. The white identitarians have the worst energy of any group by far. But these people are not that far off. And it's like when you actually understand what positive energy feels like, and then you get these people that are like, this session is light and love. It's light and love. It feels so positive. It feels so good. But they're doing it like with their voice sounds dead inside. I mean, yeah, like so like Creative America says in the chat, they look reptilian. They look like literal demons to me. That's what they look like. That's what their energy feels like. And it's like this forced authenticity of, oh, what gives me hope is this gathering. It's so forced and contrived, and it's just like, ew. It's like I have an aversion to all of it. And yet here we are torturing ourselves. People that come to happy hour, you guys are a glutton for punishment. I'm a glutton for punishment too. It's all right. At least we're in it together.
Of the Global Citizen Circle. That brings me joy.
Thank you so much. And I hope you're
Her
seeing all
eyebrows.
these like claps and dances in the chat for you. Professor Thomas, welcome you into the space. Say hello, and what's bringing you joy today?
Well, like Janet, I'm delighted to be here this morning, and I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity to meet and be part of
Bad
a
internet
learning
again. Like, what
community
is going
about
on?
which I knew very little before Janet called me a couple of months ago now to ask me if I would be willing to participate in a gathering of the Global Citizen Circle. So my life work as an educator really is to promote and participate in as broad a learning community as I can. And I'm particularly moved by the fact that this is a community that has
Robot voice.
global
I
ambitions and
am
the global
delighted to
reach,
be
because I do
here
think
this morning.
that the hope for a future on this planet is going to require us to realize that our fates are linked and our futures are linked in ways
Our
that
fates are linked.
overrun
Our
the national
futures
borders
are
that
linked.
so often divide us.
Ashe, Professor Thomas, thank you for that.
Assimilate to the Borg.
So we're going to begin our circle with Dr. Bell, and I understand you've got a presentation that you're going to start off the conversation with, and I'll just invite everyone, as Theo said at the beginning, be thinking about all your questions.
Let's see. Jameson Buck, the fictional universe is literally the story of Jakob. Tricknology is literally Bell's first tenet. Jameson, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Can you tease that out for me a little bit in the chat? You don't have to send in a super chat again. I'll look in the chat and make sure I'm paying attention. I just want to make sure I understand what you mean.
I imagine the questions will come, and I'm doing my best with the support of the Global Citizen Circle team to track those questions, but we want to get as many voices in here for conversation as possible. So Dr. Bell, I will pass the virtual mic to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the kind introduction, both you and Theo. And it's always wonderful to be with the Global Citizen Circle. I want to start off by saying, as you might have already guessed, I'm not a lawyer, and I do not play one on TV. But I have been drawn into this conversation about critical race theory because of my association with, and I can say it, the great Derek Bell. And I've decided that I really needed to develop a layperson's description of it, because I've been asked so often. Most of the time when people would...
so she's going to give us a layperson's description of critical race theory. So this would be a good time in case you don't know the definition of critical race theory. I'm going to give you my definition first as a layperson myself. Then I'm going to give you James Lindsay's definition, which is a little bit shorter and more to the point, but I don't think as descriptive. My definition of critical race theory is that critical race theory is an academic ideology that started in law schools in the 1970s that says racism exists everywhere, in every person, in everything, in every interaction, in every institution. And the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how, not if, how racism occurred in any circumstance, because racism is always assumed to have occurred. James Lindsay gets it a little bit more on the nose when he says that critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. So now let's see what she says critical race theory is, and we can compare and contrast.
call me about people who are experts, I relied on the people who literally wrote the book, like Kendall Thomas, and I would refer them to him.
I literally
and
wrote
to
a book.
others. But I think there's a place for us, and part of our civil discourse is really to be comfortable with talking about.
See, guys, now with my book, you guys are going to be able to say my definition of critical race theory, which I do discuss in the book, of course, and you're going to be able to say, I'm relying on someone who literally wrote the book for this definition. It's like an extra benefit.
This idea. So my presentation is about 10 minutes or so. So bear with me on with that. And I want to say also one word about Kendall Thomas, although one word is never enough about Kendall Thomas. We have a love fest. He is as close to the Bell family as you can get. And he has been such a supporter of Derek and of mine. I said in a private meeting, which I'll say publicly, I've probably not said it for Professor Kendall Thomas to hear it, but he was the last of our friends to see Derek's corporal body. He was with me in the hospital when my husband transitioned. You can't get much closer than that. And I just want to thank Kendall for joining in this conversation today. And I want to tell you what a wonderful treat it is for you to be able to meet him. I call him a
Nuclear. I just want to say that I know we've had our differences in the past. I know I blocked you for being a douche. I know I called you out after I unblocked you when you were like talking smack about me in Adam's chat. But I just want to say I'm really glad we've come back together because I really enjoy you being in my chat. I think your comments are really funny. And so I'm glad we were able to move past the blocking and the shit talking and all that stuff. You know, people say like I'm too much of a heart. Like, we are come together, we're friends now. Nuclear's here all the time. And I'm glad that they are. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. I don't want to misgender. I just wanted to give it love and appreciation. That's all.
true Renaissance man, a true global citizen. So I want to start with, so I've reduced it to 4 basic concepts, and they're based on values, not legal theory. So the first is defending democracy through truth and reconciliation. The next slide, please. And so these are the 4 concepts here. So I'll just read through them. Defending democracy through truth and reconciliation.
Truth and wait. Hey, oh, there's a chart coming up. Hang on. Defending democracy through truth and I don't know why this slide is still staying dull. She just said that like a key tenet of critical race theory is defending democracy through truth and reconciliation. What does the term truth and reconciliation remind you of? This is like newspeak.
Confronting the big lies and orchestrated false racial fears.
Okay, I can barely even see this on my screen. I don't know why it's so dark, but so the key tenets are, this one says so it's critical race theory up here, and then the core tenets: defending democracy through truth and reconciliation, history and facts matter. Confronting the big lies and the orchestrated false racial fears, taking responsibility and moving forward as one nation. This is the ironclad law of woke projection. This is literally the ironclad law of woke projection. They are going to project everything that they are doing onto the people who disagree with them. Yes, Dashing Rogue, we're playing bingo. The bingo card is in the description. Make sure you get it. We've just started, so you haven't missed much, but this is going to be amazing. We can already see where this is going to go.
And taking responsibility and moving forward as a nation. So let me unpack that. So first, I'll talk a little bit about defending democracy through truth and reconciliation. And we have a great examples from South Africa, where the great leaders, Desmond Tutu and others, said, you know, that they didn't let Black Africans off the hook. They said, if we're going to move forward together, you know, we've got to tell the truth. That's a novel idea these days. So that's what they endeavored to do. We also have talking about, there are other examples where people really have fought to be heard, to have their voices heard, and to reach across the differences that the perceived differences, because oftentimes there are differences that people imagine. So we have Northern Ireland, we have a lot of examples. We have the American freedom struggle movement in the South, where people had to reach across differences, and unfortunately we're still fighting that fight. And in fact, if you saw the special the other day on the Civil War, we're still fighting the Civil War, which is one of the wars in which the losers actually endeavored to and wrote the narrative. So we're living with.
This was streamed on October 29th, 2021. This was streamed like a week ago. They think they're still fighting the Civil War. This person, who is teaching at a college, presumably, believes that we are still fighting the Civil War. They also apparently don't know how to put together a PowerPoint presentation, was a whole other problem. But if you fundamentally believe that you are fighting a conflict that has been over for like what, 150 some odd years, and you believe that conflict is still going on, you probably shouldn't be trusted to define anything.
That narrative from the Civil War, from the rebels who then who built monuments to people who fought against the Union. And we see that happening now. We're looking.
This is what the ironclad law of woke projection is. They want there to be a civil war, just like they wanted racism to be a thing again. We were actually doing pretty good about racism. I'm not going to say that there were no issues about race left to tackle, because I think there were and still are. But we were doing pretty good. We'd made a lot of progress. We were moving in the right direction. But these people wanted racism to be a thing so badly that they just kept saying racism, 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 calling everyone who disagrees with them a racist. And all of a sudden, racism started to become a thing again. It's the same thing with the Civil War. The reason they're saying Civil War, we're still in a Civil War. Aren't we in a Civil War? We're still fighting the same Civil War. Is because they want there to be a Civil War. And this is how they do it. I said these people are like master manifestors. Manifesting is basically when you have a thought in your head and you want it to be a real thing, and you think about it so much and you dream about it so much and you feel as though it's true, and then it becomes a real thing because you've directed your energy and attention towards that thing. People, this is like the basis of what the law of attraction is. People think this is all crazy woo-woo nonsense. No, it's not. And the way we know it's not is because these people are actually doing it. They manifested racism. They're going to manifest a civil war. They're going to manifest all of this stuff because they believe it to be true so much, even though it is not true.
We're looking at the history of race in America being played out right now, where people are denying what's happening. January 6th is a flashpoint. But if you look at all these things where during the Obama administration, where people, his appointments were denied, and there's studies that say when you talk how people, even though Obama was probably the most conciliatory person, they called him the bridge. And if you called healthcare Obamacare, some people go, oh no, we don't want it. But if you called it the American Care Act or something like that, they would be more inclined to accept it. That was then. Now with people being anti-vax, I'm not too sure some of them would accept it now. So we have.
Let's just remind ourselves that these people's definition of being anti-vax is anyone who doesn't want vaccine mandates. I'm vaccinated, but I'm considered to be anti-vax because I don't want anyone to have to be forced to get vaccinated to keep their job. They changed the definition of what it is. Again, to demonize everyone they disagree with.
A moral imperative to look at history and facts. If we don't do that, we are.
This woman's presentation was probably literally created when she was watching MSNBC and Joy Reid. Joy Reid probably had a critical hand in this presentation.
Are not only doomed to repeat some history, and we will not be able to move forward. There's a great movie that was done, I believe, in the 1970s called The Garden of the Finzi-Continis, where there's a very rich Jewish family in Mussolini's Italy just thought, well, this isn't good. This cannot affect me. This is not happening to me. This is around me. We can play tennis. We can do whatever we want to do. But, we are immune from things that affect other people. And of course, that's until you get, as many of us have found, that knock on the door, and you realize that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we must really embrace the fact that we cannot be fact free. There is no such thing as alternative facts. History is one of explanation. Sometimes it's a distortion, but some of us are able to distinguish between what is real and what is false, although it seems less so sometimes. I'm amazed that, for example, in Tulsa, and if I get any of the legal things wrong, I'm counting on my dear friend Kendall to straighten it out when he speaks. But it's interesting that that they feel you can talk about the Tulsa, what we call riots, were really slaughters, and mostly slaughters of Black citizens here, because for some reason people had built up this narrative, this false narrative of that Black people were a danger to society. It was okay when we could build this country, but once we started becoming successful against all the odds, many of these riots were really attacks on Black progress, and that was the case on Black Wall Street in Tulsa. So there are many examples of that. So we're looking and we're seeing racism in real time. So how do we confront that? We have to deal directly with people. We have a grievance culture now. People feel that they have the right to be aggrieved for whatever reason it is.
Yes, you are 100% correct. We have a grievance culture, and people feel like they have a right to be aggrieved for whatever it is. And that's because of critical effing race theory. That's because of these people. These people created the grievance culture. It is their culture. And now they're going to project it onto everyone else because they don't want to take responsibility for their own actions.
To throw facts out the window, to be discourteous, to be dishonest, that the only thing that counts is winning. Winning is the only thing, no matter how you get there, and no matter how detrimental it is to those people who think they are winning, those who deny voting to others, those who are in denial about climate change. Climate change affects us all. There's no planet, there's no Earth 2. We are literally all in this together. So how do we confront those fears? The biggest thing is to tell the truth and to be as positive and authentic.
You know what? This is really good advice. How do we confront people like this? We tell the truth and we try to be positive and optimistic. Sometimes we can be a little bit snarky. Sometimes we can have entire live streams making fun of people in order to tell the truth. I'm not gonna be mad at it. Jenny's getting inky with it. Says funny that the person who helped make anti-vaxxer public, Jenny McCarthy, isn't conservative. She thought measles vax caused her kids autism. Now I'm not gonna make any comment on that. I am not anti-vaccine in any way for any vaccine. Gotta turn my light on. It was like really bright in here when I started and then it got dark. No, like I'm not like I just think that people should be given a choice, especially with the COVID vaccine. I think you should consult with your doctors. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Contact the CDC. The CDC is your god. Remember, always trust blindly everything the CDC tells you, or else the YouTube overlords will demonetize my channel. Let's keep going.
As we can. And Theo mentioned hope. I am always hopeful because I believe, as Brian Stevenson says, that hopelessness is the enemy of social justice. And I wake up every day. I thank the Lord for the world that has been made. And I try to do my best to preserve it and to honor and preserve the people in it. One thing about when we talk about how do we confront the big lies? We have to realize that Americans, for some reason, are
TPS says climate change is the new power pivot for the woke. That is exactly right. Climate change is going to be the next big woke focus, and we should all be prepared for that. We're going to hear a lot of stuff in the news about climate change, climate change, climate change. It's going to be linked to racism. We're going to hear about climate equity, which is about, basically implementing different things in different neighborhoods depending on the demographic composition of those neighborhoods, things like that. We're going to hear a lot about that.
Unhappy bunch. We all can't move to Iceland now. So we have to figure out how we educate people to know without blaming them, because I believe that most people are good. In fact, it's probably their figures that go from 20 to 30% of the people.
You guys are killing it with the super chats today. Thank you so much. George Andre Valso Nunez says, if there were Earth 2, they should go there and leave normal people alone. Yes. Well, and that's why I frankly believe that the best thing that people can do is to start congregating in communities where people believe the same thing as you. That's why I live in New Hampshire. And that's why I'm staying in New Hampshire. Thank God I moved to New Hampshire when I was still a Democrat. I had heard of the Free State Project. I thought it was silly. I thank God. Thank God. The universe is a wonderful thing. The universe will send you signs. The universe will put you in the right place for you. The universe put me in New Hampshire 10 years ago, 10 and a half. Me moving to New Hampshire was actually how I met my husband, because he was a mover. So 10 and a half years ago, the universe put me here, and I'm really glad it did.
Who are the ones who are entrenched in terms of this grievance mentality, and those who might overthrow legally elected governments and things like that, the insurrectionists. That's a small group. As my mother, the philosopher, the late Willie Mae Neal, would say, sometimes the lunatics run the asylum. And what we have to do is take it back. We have to recapture the people who testified yesterday in the United States. And I know this is a global audience, who taught these election officials who talked about how the threats on their lives for just doing their jobs, and their job writ large is really protecting the democracy. If we do not have the right
is she
to
talking
vote,
about, was there some January 6th commission thing? What is she talking about? This was last week. So this would have been on October 28th. What was there, like a January 6th testimony on October 28th? I joked earlier that I thought that she wrote this while she was watching MSNBC. She might literally have written this presentation while watching testimony from crazy people on MSNBC. She still hasn't defined critical race theory, by the way. Her definition of critical race theory is completely out of left field. It has absolutely nothing to do with any normal definition of critical race theory, whether it be woke or whether it be correct. This definition is, I don't like Republicans, I don't like conservatives, I don't like people who disagree with me politically, and that means we have to teach critical race theory to make more people who agree with me. That's literally what she's saying. She's saying that critical race theory is going to make more people believe the truth as I see it. It's going to make more people like me. And that's why we need to have critical race theory. That's what she's saying. No joke.
we have lost the game. That's where it is. I suggest to people that we have to watch our language, because we sometimes adopt language without thinking that really helps perpetuate the negativity. So if we say that critical race theory is a divisive issue, I don't say that. Critical race theory is a theory of enlightenment. It's a theory of love. It's a theory of how we talk together, how we embrace.
Critical race theory is a theory of love. That definitely doesn't sound like it comes from a cult. That doesn't sound like a cult at all. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, lunatics run the asylum. Who's in federal office again? Exactly. Critical race theory is a theory of love. I want to make a t-shirt. I always have these bright ideas for t-shirts that I forget about later. I still have not let go of the Flying Monkeys t-shirt that I have an idea for, and people who know, they don't know what I'm talking about. But I just had a vision of a t-shirt that it's like a bunch of, like, it's like a cartoon, like classroom or something where people have all these wires hooked up to their brain and they're having to repeat like the line as though they're being like put it through re-education camp, and what they're saying is critical race theory is a theory of love, critical race theory is a theory of love, critical race theory is a theory of love, over and over and over again, maybe like writing it on the chalkboard, critical race theory is a theory of love, critical race. In the re-education camps, that's what they'll do. That's what we're all going to have to do when we get sent to the gulag.
Our joint history with a clear eye, an open heart, and a clear mind. That's what I think critical race theory is. So we have to really look at the language that we use, and we need to take responsibility if we want to move forward. I love the title of today's Global Citizen Circle. I was thinking about it. I didn't come up with the title, but I love it. It says, Critical Race Theory, Facing Our History, Freeing Our Future. And I thought we could actually flip that and it would still be the same. It would show a different aspect of it. Freeing our history, facing our future. By freeing our history, what we do, we look at such things as what impact slavery has had. There's now a Black group that is now trying to counter the teachings of the 1619 Project. So you'll always have people who are not doing the right thing.
So she just said there's a Black group that's trying to counter the teachings of the 1619 Project. So you always have people who are not going to do the right thing. Well, that sounds a little bit racist to me to assume that all Black people should think the same thing. If we're talking about racism, which is inevitably is what these people think we're talking about, it sounds a little bit racist to me to say that you are Black, therefore you must think like me. Sounds a little bit racist. And if you don't think like me, you're just not doing the right thing.
End with a couple quotes. One from one of my favorite rabbis, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who walked with Dr. Martin Luther King. And someone was challenging him for his activism. And aren't you a person who's supposed to be in this theoretical ivory tower, just espousing these sort of theories and that? Aren't you supposed to be leading us in prayer? And Rabbi said, I'm praying with my feet. And that's what we have to do. We have to pray with our feet sometimes, and we have to embrace the fact that we may not all get there at the same time, but we have to get there, and we have to have faith and hope that that is going to be the case. And I end with hope.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Bell, thank you for that. And, as you say, this layperson's view of critical race theory. Professor Thomas, I want to invite you into the conversation and see first if you'd want to add anything to what Dr. Bell has shared around CRT from particularly a legal perspective. Now, we're not all lawyers, but there are particular tenets of CRT that maybe we want to uplift here. And then as you're doing that, maybe talk about the ways CRT has been misrepresented or weaponized in recent times.
Yes.
And why you think that is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janet. I can build on what Janet has just said by simply noting again that critical race theory emerged from law schools. Critical race theory was and remains an effort to describe and explain a legal failure.
Now, I just want to point out here that my definition of critical race theory, which is much better than that woman's definition of critical race theory, acknowledges that it originated in law schools. It did. That doesn't mean it stayed in law schools, and it doesn't mean the only impact is in law schools. It is now everywhere. It has ballooned out of control from their little ivory tower paradise, but this guy probably legitimately does not understand this because he does not leave the ivory tower. So he's going to try to say that this is just a legal theory. It's just about analyzing the law. That's all it is. Critical race theory, how much you want to bet they're going to say critical race theory isn't taught in K through 12 schools. Does anyone think we are going to see that coming up? I bet we are. Let's see.
Failure of U.S. law to make good on the constitutional promise of full democratic citizenship.
Okay, if we're talking about critical race theory analyzing the failures of US law, then what I'm going to expect is that this guy, who is a lawyer, is going to be able to enumerate specific laws that he believes cause racial disparities. If he cannot enumerate specific laws, specific policies that cause racial disparities that we should get rid of or amend or update or any of these things, then I'm not going to take him seriously that this is just about analyzing the law. Because if it was just about analyzing the law, they should be able to come in with a list and say, this law does X, this law does Y, this policy does B, X, Y, B, and Z. And they should be able to enumerate, here is the impact of these specific policies and how we need them to change in order to be less racist. That's what they should be able to do, but they never do that. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, remember 50 Cent is not black anymore. He's not 50 Cent either. He's 30 Cent now. Nicki Minaj apparently isn't black either.
For people of color in the United States. So I want to center that as the project of critical race theory, because by remarking its institutional location in law schools, I can highlight the ways in which critical race theory is concerned, and centrally so, about teaching and supporting a culture of racial literacy in the United States. And that connects to the question you just raised.
Well, that's a fundamentally different thing, isn't it? It seems to me that analyzing the law is fundamentally different than supporting a culture of racial literacy in the United States. So that's what the real aim of this is. Support a culture of racial literacy in the United States within the confines of how we want you to understand the topic of racism. Those are two different things. This is not about analyzing the law. This is about supporting a culture of racial literacy. And what will that culture of racial literacy do? Help them to gain more power, because critical race theory is not about race. It is only about power. That is all that it is about. Race is simply the weapon that they are using in the war.
Raised about the misrepresentation of CRT. Now, I think that the misrepresentation of CRT, or what its opponents are calling CRT, is not a mistake. It's a deliberate tactic that's connected to a larger strategy of weaponization.
Okay.
And what's being
What are we doing?
weaponized is not critical race theory.
What are we doing?
Since the attackers of critical race theory actually have very little knowledge and no interest at all in critical race theory.
Really? We have no interest at all in critical race theory? I am literally broadcasting you on my channel to get your highly educated opinion about what this is. I have no interest in critical race theory. My definition of critical race theory is closer to yours than the other ladies in this presentation was. I would not be broadcasting you. I'm talking to him as though he can talk back to me. I don't even care. I would not be broadcasting you on my channel live on the internet to more views than this presentation has on their YouTube channel if I was not interested in critical race theory. So let's just debunk that right off the bat. Next.
What's being weaponized is illiteracy. Some of you may remember the remarks
Illiteracy.
of then presidential
What's being weaponized is illiteracy. Okay.
Candidate Donald Trump.
No, then President Donald Trump, actually.
After the Nevada Republican primary, in which he thanked his
I guess he was a candidate then, never mind.
Constituencies, and said at one point, I love the poorly educated. So I want to submit to you that the entire platform of the Republican Party.
Did Trump actually say that? Is that an accurate quote? Now, that sounds like something Trump would say, to be honest. But I just want to do a fact check in the chat. Is that what Trump actually said, or did he misquote him? Because I don't remember specifically.
Can be understood through the lens of that statement and Donald Trump's professed love, which in fact was thinly veiled contempt for the poorly educated.
No.
Because
no, it was not. Okay, if that was true, it was not contempt for the uneducated. It was contempt for the educated. It was contempt for you. It was contempt for people like you that live in an ivory tower and consider yourselves to be better people because of the piece of paper you have with your name on it. And I say that as someone who has a literal PhD sitting over in a fancy folder on my fucking bookshelf. It's showing contempt for you because you show contempt for everyone that does not think like you.
The right-wing attack on critical race theory has weaponized this country's epidemic of racial illiteracy, right? But also this country's epidemic of functional or basic illiteracy. Right? And I'm talking here quite simply about the inability of large numbers of Americans to read and write. So just some facts. According to the website Planet Word.
Did he just say that we aren't capable of reading and writing? Does this guy really think that everyone who has a PhD thinks like him? Okay.
32 million American adults cannot read, and 34% of fourth graders were unable to read at a basic level on national tests.
Yes, that is true. We have abominably low reading and writing scores according to the National Report Card. You want to know why that is? Because they're teaching effing critical race theory in grade school instead of teaching reading and writing. If this guy thinks that the people being graduated from colleges and universities today can read and write, I assure you that is not true. Most of them can't write basic effing papers because you aren't allowed to correct them anymore. And because they're spending all their time talking about race and social justice and misogyny and racism and all these things and transphobia. And they can't read and write because of it. I used to have to train recent college graduates how to write basic flipping memos or emails. They couldn't do it. They didn't know how. But they'd been through college. So they are the educated.
In 2019. According to the Department of Education, the US Department of Education, 54% of adults in the United States can't read and write at a sixth grade level. And 50% of Americans can't read a book written at an eighth grade level. So
well, that to me seems like a pretty clear indictment of our public school system, and I think is a great argument for school choice. I think that we should immediately defund the Department of Education for the results that it's producing and not being accountable to the public. And I think that people should be able to avail themselves of whatever educational options that they want. I think that this guy is making an excellent argument for school choice as a stopgap until we're able to defund education entirely. I don't like school choice as the final solution. I think that education should be completely effing privatized. I don't think the state should be involved in it at all, because when the state is involved in education, they inevitably screw it up. Well, Richard, you know, the great and glorious leader, Matt Walsh, is working very hard and diligently on cameras in classrooms, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing movement on this issue at any moment now.
By the time they reach eighth grade, 66% of American kids can't read on grade level. And every year, 1 in 6 Americans drop out of school. Now, 3 of every 5 Americans who are in this country's prisons cannot read. And 85%, let me just say that again, 85% of young people who come into the criminal punishment system, into the prison industrial complex, or what we call rightly the school to prison pipeline, are functionally illiterate. 70% of people in US prisons can't read at a fourth grade level, and 48% of incarcerated people in this country are functionally illiterate. Forbes magazine estimates that the low literacy levels among US adults could be costing the economy $2.2 trillion a year.
Then why aren't we holding the public government funded schools accountable for these results? Why are we treating the teachers' unions as though they just want what's in the best interest of the child? Because they don't. They don't. It is the public schools and the teachers' unions that are responsible for all of this. And if you really care about fixing this, then maybe the first step is to defund the effing schools, or to implement school choice, or vouchers, or education freedom accounts, and to really start investing in homeschooling. Man. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm like, given the way this is going, so I mean, we got a long time left for bingo, guys. So don't worry. We're gonna get the bingo going. Don't worry.
And so the crisis of democracy that we are living in real time in the United States is.
I just want to say thank you to Z over on Odyssey for what I don't know what Odyssey calls their super chat thing, but thank you, Z, for that. I appreciate it, for the tip.
Closely connected, in my view, to the crisis of illiteracy, right? And we have to understand the Republican Party's weaponization of illiteracy.
There it is. Oh, the Republican Party's weaponization of literacy. So now he's being really overt about who he thinks the enemy is, which is the Republican Party. The Republican Party wants school choice, dude. The Republican Party doesn't want this, but the public schools to be failing. Why do you want the public schools to be failing and continue to be funded?
In that light, it's part of a broader project and a raft of laws and policies that aim to purge public education and our public institutions of any ability to talk in a thoughtful way.
No, we just want to purge public education entirely. We want you to be able to talk in a thoughtful way. We just don't believe, and I say this as a non-Republican, we just don't believe that public education is facilitating your ability to have thoughtful conversations. So we just like to purge public education entirely. Not of thoughtful conversation, just entirely.
About race and racial power in the United States. So this is a political project which is weaponizing our literacy about race and our functional illiteracy and our civic illiteracy to destroy the very foundations of the democratic idea, which has always been an imperfect idea in the United States. So I think we need to understand on one side the connection between democracy and literacy, between democracy and literacy on one hand, and between fascism and illiteracy on the other. And let me just say, if we care...
He just called Republicans fascists. He literally just called... Dude, it is your government-funded public schools that is creating the illiteracy problem in this country that you are talking about. It is your public government-funded schools that are doing this, and you might want to look up the definition of fascism while you're at it.
About the future of democratic citizenship, not just in the United States, but globally, we have to be willing to use the word fascism. It's not a dirty word. And it connects what is going on in our present to a long history of attacks on the possibility of democracy, multiracial and otherwise. So I want to say that as an educator, critical race theory for me is first and foremost about creating the conditions of possibility for defending.
How is critical race theory going to teach more people how to read? How is critical race theory going to teach more people how to write? He is not answering these questions.
And enlarging the culture of civic literacy.
Professor Thomas, thank you for that. And I'm going to ask one question as I invite others, as you're hearing these two like brilliant, full presentations, reflections, to put your questions in the chat. And we've also been overloading you with resources in the chat. So there is books and articles. Most recently, the New Yorker had a piece on the origins of CRT, and then related books that speak to some of what Professor Thomas was just listing up, particularly this notion of debunking the zero-sum game thinking. So there's a link to Heather McGee's The Sum of Us that I would really encourage folks to read and study and use that in your advocacy work. But Professor Thomas and Dr. Bell, one question I'd love to have you both talk on, because I think Professor Thomas, you did just a beautiful job of connecting or the ways that CRT has been weaponized with groups with whom have actually a vested interest in understanding that his...
Guys, before we get into this, I just want to do a quick pause because we're about an hour into this now. If you have just joined us for happy hour, we do this every Friday at 3 p.m. on my channel, on Odyssey and Rockfin and YouTube and all the different places. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are not subscribed already. If you are subscribed, please make sure you're turning on notifications, because then you might actually get served my content every now and again. And please, of course, mount that like button for me if you're enjoying this so far, or maybe even if it makes you angry, because I know these aren't always fun things to watch, but we watch them so we can understand them and mock them relentlessly.
Right? Because that history of our structural racism is not just impacting a small slice of the population, it's actually impacting all of us, right? And so the inability to understand that and to incorporate that and then to be turned against it, I think has been actually brilliant on the part of those who are against what we're talking about here. But with one of the notions of CRT, one of the tenets around interest convergence, right? Trying to understand where those who have power or trying to hold on to power may need to cede to bring about something different with those who are on the margin, and trying to find that, again, that point of interest convergence. What's your answer to how we bring along those who are both illiterate in the way, Professor Thomas, that you outlined, like just basically illiterate, much less racially and civically illiterate, to understand that their needs and interests are served in this truth-telling process? So I put that out as a first question for both of you to engage with as I'm checking in the chat here to bring others into the circle.
Janet, would you like to go first?
Well, I was thinking here, first of all, those powerful words that you said, and I like you talking about the, racial literacy and what have you. And I was thinking about, I just wanted to raise one thing before addressing your question directly, and that is the Cheryl Harris, another critical race theorist, who's written about the property right in whiteness. And what this country has done in terms of systemic racism is that
property right in whiteness. So for those of you who don't know, maybe you're new to this. So when they say whiteness, they're not really talking about the color of people's skin. They're talking about who owns the power structure. And so what a lot of these people, and we hear this come up in literally every single training that we watch, is that the concept of being white has less to do with whether or not you're pasty white like me, and more to do with how much power you own. So they look down particularly on landlords. Did you guys notice this? All throughout the pandemic, like landlords were billed as the ultimate evil people. Why? Because they own property, because they own the power structure. So even if you had landlords that were white or black or Hispanic or Latino or Native American or any of these things, it didn't matter. If you were a landlord, you had assimilated to whiteness because you were a property owner, and owning property is power. So we have to start making sure we're really understanding what they mean by the term whiteness, because a lot of people think it's about the color of your skin. It is not about the color of your skin. It's about who owns the power structure. Giorgio says maybe they think they're not literate unless you read critical race theory. Giorgio, I'm fairly certain that is exactly what they mean.
That we have built to build white supremacy. You have to say that there's something different about and something special about to privilege white folks. So as people, as immigrants have come to the United States and they were considered less than white, and then they became white. White was the standard by which people were trying to obtain, and so that has been a part of the history too. And it's hard for people to get away from that. I think in terms of interest convergence, to me, it's right in front of us when we talk about the basic tenets of our democracy. We are under attack.
Can
Adam
you
Schiff
see the Trump
spoke,
derangement?
Midnight in Washington,
Adam
where
Schiff's
he
book.
says
Holy
that
shit.
we might, you talked about January 6th, the insurrection, where we might lose it. People don't seem to understand that if they can take rights away, if one person can, let's say, disenfranchise or overturn the election of a congressional district or a statewide district, they're
Speaking of overturning duly elected officials, has Terry McAuliffe conceded yet? Has Terry McAuliffe, the losing governor in Virginia, conceded his race yet? Or is he trying to overturn the election results? Do you think those election results are going to be contested? I bet they will. I bet they will, unless they tell Terry McAuliffe to go quietly. And he did. Okay, I take it back. Terry McAuliffe did a really weird dance on election night, though. Did you guys see this? He obviously got drunk because he came out and his lips were purple, so he was like obviously drinking red wine. And he came out and did a really weird dance. That's good. He conceded, though. They probably browbeat him. They're like, "You're not challenging this. They'll lose it against us or use it against us." Good for him, though. Good.
power really goes beyond that. What you've done is you've given the devil more than the devil is due. You've given the devil power.
That wasn't
to
lipstick. That was
lives.
wine.
We see it. Texas is one example of that. How once people give up the people power and do not speak up, and that's what democracy is. Democracy is not a spectator sport. If we want to have an active democracy, we have to be involved in it, and we have to preserve it, or at least we've got to support it. We cannot stand by idly. You know, there's some people who say, I'm not into politics. I want to say, well, sweetheart, your life is really run by politics, and that's something that we have to look at. And so we have to say it in a way that brings people in. And I tell people that we don't have a lot of time left on this if we want to save our democracy. When the more we know about what happened between October 2020 and what happened and is happening now, the more we should be concerned that if we want a functioning democracy where it is not a plutocracy, where we are bound to the whims, wishes, perversion of a few, we have got to act. And it's got to be, and I'm speaking in language for the Global Citizen Circle. When I speak to a different audience, I try to break it down just a little bit more. So I hope that answers part of your question.
Let me just pick up on what Janet has said about this notion of whiteness as property. I think it's fair to say, as the critical race theorist Barbara Flagg has insightfully noted, that at least in the United States and perhaps elsewhere, one of the things that defines white racial identity is the fact that most white people, most of the time, in most places, as they navigate daily life and their relationships in the public and private sphere, rarely, if ever, have to think about the fact that they're white.
Really? I knew that's what he was going to say. I effing knew that's what he was going to say. I should have paused and predicted it before he said it, but I was like, in my head, I'm going, he's going to say that white people don't have to think about race. He's going to say that white people don't think about race. Are you kidding me? I have never thought, I mean, maybe this is part of the point, but like, I have never thought about being white so much in my effing life as after I discovered this nonsense. And I suspect the same is true for every person of every race. I suspect the same thing is true. These people want people to be thinking about the color of their skin and everyone else's skin all the time. Why? Because they're using race as a mechanism to divide us. TPS says no self-awareness, talking about themselves. But they truly think, they're like, white people just don't think about race. You, dude, people like you don't allow us to think about anything else.
And Barbara Flagg calls that the phenomenon of white racial transparency. So it's the way of looking at the world that stands behind the statement, for example, I don't see color, or people are just people, right? And it takes as its baseline the experience that most white people have of not thinking about the fact that they're white. Now, one of the things that we have seen in the last 10 years, or even more really, because it was part of the Birther Project, of which Donald Trump was the public
These
face
people cannot
during the
get
Trump
off of Trump.
administration.
They just want to keep doing Trump, Trump, Trump,
Is
Trump,
the
Trump all the
coming
time, all the time, all the
together
time.
of a white racial identity politics and the marrying of the cultural politics of white racial identity, which is very different than the phenomenon of white racial transparency.
Oh,
The marrying
tell us.
of a cultural politics of white racial identity to an electoral politics of authoritarian populism, right? At whose heart is a commitment to strongman, illiberal democracy. So this monocultural, ethno-racial, right, illiberal, democratic vision has emerged as a way to address and organize the imagination of American citizens, right? The great Black cultural theorist Stuart Hall, writing after the election of the Tory party and Margaret Thatcher to a third term in office, reminded people in England that the way people imagine themselves is at the very heart of politics. And liberals and progressives and leftists, I'll just use those terms interchangeably.
Those terms are not interchangeable. Sorry. I do like that he's using the term leftist, which makes me believe that this guy is clued in more than he wants people to think. But liberal and progressive and leftist are not the same thing. I am a liberal. I've always been a liberal. I will always be a liberal. Liberal means liberty. That's what it means. It's a definition of the dang word. Liberal comes from liberty. Progressive and leftist is a completely different thing. Completely different thing entirely.
I think that politics is about ideas and making the better argument and policies and interests. But Hall pointed out that what Margaret Thatcher had been able to do, and this is what the Republican Party is so clearly trying to do. What Margaret Thatcher and the Tories had been able to do in England was to cobble together what he called a symbolic majority, right? It wasn't the actual majority of Americans, but it was a symbolic majority of people who were united by identity and the way they imagined themselves. And the
Randall says the woke use emotional blackmail by calling good people is and phobics to get their way. It is a form of bullying. Don't let them do it. Yes, and I'll even go one step further than this and say that we are never obligated to play by the rules that these people set. And I think that this is a mistake that a lot of people make when they're fighting the woke and they're trying to push back on this stuff, is they make the mistake of believing that they are required to fight by the rules that these people set, either by how they change the definition of language or by how they're approaching you. You are never obligated to accept the premise that these people put forth. You're never obligated to play on their playing field. You are never obligated to play by their rules. In fact, they do not know how to handle it when you fundamentally reject their rules. They lose it. I have had little leftist debate bros in my feed on Twitter for the last day and a half. Why? Because I did a Twitch stream the other night in which I actually had a great conversation with a guy named Joe Lewis, who is on fundamentally different sides than me, but we were actually able to find common ground, and it was actually really good. It was on Spectre's channel. But like, I said something to frankly proactively annoy one of the liberal leftist debate bros, and their minions have been in my feed constantly. And why they're so pissed is because I didn't play by their rules. I fundamentally refuse to play by their rules, and they so desperately want me to, but I refuse to do it because it pisses them off and they don't know how to handle it. Every single person can do the same. I'm not really on Twitch all that much. I don't have a Twitch channel or anything. But occasionally I go on. Occasionally when I'm invited.
The irony or the paradox is that this is a politics which in fact has weaponized whiteness against white people, right? To blind them to the ways in which the struggle against racism and for racial justice is an indispensable ingredient of a future in which
this guy talks so slow.
They would receive the social and economic justice that is consigning so many Americans who are white to quite literally to death. Some of you may have read the extraordinary book by Anne Case and Angus Deaton called Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism, in which they point out a number of really sobering facts about the white working class. So white men without a college degree experienced an average growth in median wages between 1979 and 2017 that was negative, minus 0.2% a year, even as median hourly wages for all white workers grew by 11% in the same period. Moreover, deaths from suicide, drug overdoses, and alcohol-related disease among middle-aged white men and women skyrocketed from 30 per 100,000 in 1990.
White privilege, am I right?
92 per 100,000 in 2017. And the spike in these deaths was almost exclusively confined to white Americans, both men and women without a college degree. Donald Trump's poorly educated. Right? Mortality rates
you're
among
poorly
college-educated
educated
Americans have continued to fall. And mortality rates for white working class people in other wealthy countries are similarly in decline, right? So the story of whiteness, a phrase I hesitate to use because it's frustratingly imprecise and lends itself to misunderstanding, right? So I want to talk about this idea of
why is the term whiteness fundamentally misunderstood? Could it be because you guys are trying to get people to think that things are the result of skin color when they are really not, and you're using the term whiteness as trickery because you guys like to change definitions? Could that be why that term is fundamentally confusing? Let's listen. Let's listen to him explain what whiteness actually is.
um, whiteness as property. Basically, white
Property.
working class Americans are coming to realize what Martin Luther King in the 60s said Black folk had come to realize. Basically, they were holding a blank check, right? And so the racial capital, the symbolic capital of being white for large segments of the US population really is dead capital, right? It quite literally means a destiny in this country whose destination is death. And so I think, in fact, if we're talking about how to begin the hard cultural and political work of creating a multiracial solidarity among American citizens that understands the connection between racial justice and economic justice, we have to start by acknowledging, in ways that we are not always willing to do, white working class suffering, right? And the ways in which whiteness and white identity politics has become, in the words of one theologian writing about capitalism, actually,
Ding, 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 ding. Capitalism.
an ideological weapon of death. Right? Now,
ding, ding, ding. It always comes back to capitalism. I mean, I think it's interesting that he's talking about like white identity politics when most of the people in the Republican Party just like want to talk about the issues and don't want identity politics. In the Mises Caucus in the Libertarian Party, which is what I'm a member of, they specifically have an anti-identity politics platform. They fundamentally reject the idea of identity politics entirely. But people like this, because they live in an ivory tower and they don't go into the real world and they don't talk to real people, they do not know that we do not care as much about race as they do. They do. This guy fundamentally believes that people who look like me make decisions based entirely on the color of my skin and the color of your skin and the color of their skin and their skin over there and their skin over there. They fundamentally, like, you know, talk about a colorblind society, which again, they have changed the term colorblind, which is why I don't really use it. I prefer color indifferent because I can see that he's black. That guy's black. He's obviously black. I'm not blind to the color of his skin, but I'm indifferent to it. I'm not going to treat him differently because he's black. I'm going to call out all his horrible ideas in spite of him being black because I don't care that he's black. I care that he has horrible ideas.
this is not particularly sunny or hopeful language, but one of the things that I learned from Derek Bell was my responsibility as an intellectual who thinks about race, be a realist, right? And so racial realism at this moment in our history requires me to note that we cannot understand, that we have to understand the connection between Black precarity and Black privation, right? Whether we're talking about COVID and healthcare more generally, whether we're talking about homelessness, whether we're talking about the poor state of schools in Black and brown communities, and white precarity and white privation among the white working class. We don't really like to talk about class in this country.
I think, hang on.
But I think
Dude, if you want to have a conversation about class in this country, I would be completely on board, because socioeconomic status is the thing that is actually the problem that we should be solving for in most of these circumstances. So if you ever want to change the topic off of critical race theory and talk about class and socioeconomic status and how we get more opportunities available to people who are at a lower socioeconomic status, maybe how we can implement entrepreneurship programs in high schools in underserved communities, I would be completely 100% on board with that every single day of the week. Let's teach lower class communities, whether they be Black, white, or otherwise, let's teach people at a lower socioeconomic status how to start a business, how to build a business, how to create wealth. I don't care what their skin color is, provide these classes to everyone. Because capitalism is the thing that we can use to uplift the most possible people in our society. So if that's a conversation you want to have, let's have it.
Need a mixed analysis and a mixed practical program, right? Of an imaginal politics, of a politics that interrupts the ways in which the right wing has gotten people to imagine themselves, that really brings the question of class into the national conversation and allows us to talk about actually existing racial capitalism in the United States as a capitalism whose predations and whose inequalities and inequities.
Wait, he's talking about capitalism. I want to go back and get this because, again, it always comes back to capitalism. The real enemy of critical race theorists is not white people. It's not white people. The real enemy of critical race theorists is capitalism. That's why they don't want to argue for entrepreneurship programs being put into communities where they're with lower socioeconomic status. That's why they don't want to support capitalism. Their goal is to fundamentally destabilize the system so we usher in a different economic system. Giorgio says, talk to CRT advocates about actual solutions and see what their reaction is. I would love to have a conversation with a critical... Actually, I kind of did this on Twitch the other day. I basically said exactly what I said. I'm like, let's put an entrepreneurship program in every underserved community in America. You have no problem with me. And we found common ground on that. We did. Because I was hesitant to go on Twitch. Side note. And if you want the Twitch stream, like it's in my Twitter somewhere. But like I was hesitant to go on Twitch, but we actually had a really good conversation. It was me and like a leftist and like Black public school teacher. And we had a great conversation. We actually found a lot of common ground. But you don't want to know why? Because he isn't crazy. He's not fully indoctrinated into this. He might think he is, but he's not. He's not one of these people. And we were actually able to find a lot of common ground and talk about real solutions. And it was kind of a little bit of like a white pill for me because I was like, real people actually care about real solutions. This is great. Okay, we can disagree on some stuff. I don't really care. If we're talking about real solutions and we're making a little bit of progress, that's good enough for me. I just want to rewind a little bit, though, because he was talking about capitalism. I wasn't really following because he was speaking so slow.
Politics that interrupts the ways in which the right wing has gotten people to imagine themselves, that really brings the question of class into the national conversation and allows us to talk about actually existing racial capitalism in the United States as a capitalism whose predations and whose
Racial capitalism.
inequalities and inequities, right, may be more visible among people of color, but which have targeted and are quite literally engaged in a murderous politics among.
Capitalism is engaged in a murderous politics? Do you guys see what I mean when I say that these people perceive capitalism to be the enemy? It's not white people, it's capitalism. Because I can't process at the higher speeds. Because remember, like, I'm reacting to all of this, and I just, like, sometimes I just need a minute to process what I'm also, like, I'm about to. Why don't I open a beer? Is this Samantha from Spectre's channel? Is that who this is? I was just talking about the stream with Joe the other night, and I thought it was really good. All right, I'm gonna open a beer. I'm only having one beer today because I'm going out for dinner with Victor later, and I don't want to be sloshed because it's our 10th anniversary. I want to be respectful, but I am having a beer. It is a Southern Tier Warlock, which is an Imperial Pumpkin Stout. Happy hour, everyone. Happy hour. Happy Friday. We made it. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Please make sure you mount that like button if you haven't yet. And please make sure you join me in my locals community. It's ticking by on the ticker. It's free to join. You don't have to pay if you don't want to. Paying is just like if you want to unlock all the features, if you want to support the work I'm doing, that's cool. But if you just want to join locals to find out like what it's about, just go like while we're watching this. What else are you guys doing? I know you're playing bingo, but like you can multitask. Head over to kb.locals.com. Make sure you sign up. That way you'll always be able to communicate with me if I get a stupid strike or anything like that. Cheers, everyone. Happy Friday.
On white people, right? So I think we have, I don't see any more urgent task, right, at this moment than that.
Thank you both, because I think in both your answers, you're weaving in all these other tenets for folks to understand around CRT, this notion of intersectionality, Professor Thomas, that you're
intersectionality, bingo word.
But also the importance of, and I started off by talking about how we can ground CRT to imagine this new world, right? The power of imagination and belief, right? That our sort of right wing in this country has done, I would say, a beautiful job of having people buy into a particular narrative and understanding of who they are, whether it's quote unquote true or not. And the grounding in CRT of the importance of both the storytelling counter narrative to help imagine something different. And
right.
that is when we think about we're going to get to the questions now because there's questions about like how do we counter, but this cultural exercise, if you will, around imagination, I think is exactly what we're needing to do in this moment in time. Okay, I've got to open up the circle to the 130 folks in here. We've got at least 4 questions. And let me, Carrie Larkin, I'll invite you. You had the first question and see if you'd still like to pose it here. Why don't you open your mic and come on into the space?
Thank you. I'd be grateful to ask my question. I share the warmth and the intellectual energy of the circle this morning. My first circle, I was in high school, and I am way far from high school now. I taught high school for many years and taught critical race theory and benefited so much.
Wait. Did she just say that she taught critical race theory in high school? I'm pretty sure that's exactly what she just said. Now, you know how we've been hearing for the past couple days about how critical race theory isn't in K through 12 schools. I don't even know what you guys are talking about. In fact, critical race theory isn't even real, according to Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. Critical race theory isn't real. Let's just rewind this a little bit. I want to hear her introduction because I'm pretty sure she just said she taught critical race theory in high school. Pretty sure she just did.
Okay, I've got to open up the circle to the 130 folks in here. We've got at least 4 questions. And let me, Carrie Larkin, I'll invite you. You had the first question and see if you'd still like to pose it here. Why don't you open your mic and come on into the space?
Thank you. I'd be grateful to ask my question. I share the warmth and the intellectual energy of the circle this morning. My first circle, I was in high school, and I am way far from high school now. I taught high school for many years and taught critical race theory and benefited so much.
I taught high school for many years and taught critical race theory and benefited so much. Sounds like she taught critical race theory in high school to me. I'm just saying.
From its teaching. And what I'm grappling with, what I find myself grappling with as a white woman, is how to speak up in spaces that do not feel like this. How to speak up in defense and protection of what we on this call believe in spaces that do not feel this warm and welcome. And so I would ask the two doctors, what would be our, not so much our personal steps of courage and bravery, but like the talking points and the way to enter into and facilitate a conversation with particularly white people who are protecting their white identity as opposed to
white people who are protecting their
not even
whiteness.
seeing it as an identity.
Mm.
And thank you for the opportunity to ask.
Well, I think that there's so many variations and subtleties with how people approach this whiteness, and people who think that they are so above that. White people who really believe passionately that they are not racist and are not using and have not bought into a system of white supremacy.
There are these silly white people who fundamentally believe that they are racist and haven't bought into white supremacy. Those silly white people who really think they're not racist because, according to these people, all white people are racist, regardless of their behaviors. It's just the way we're socialized. Silly white people if you don't believe you're a racist.
And so it really is how being sensitive to that area. But one of the things that I've been working on, and this is not, and I will be working on it forever, it seems.
Everyone
but
is racist.
To tell when people are speaking in ways that I want to, I feel that I need to have an interruption, a cultural interruption, shall we say. And I've learned to be much more civil. Thank you, Global Citizen Circle, in doing that. But I start with, well, I say this because it's true. I understand that you have concerns and that you are angry or dissatisfied or something, and you probably have the right to be have some sort of upset, but you're angry at the wrong thing. You're angry at the wrong people. You have now transferred that to people who are who are vulnerable and who you should be working to uplift. So sometimes I tell people you have to think outside of yourself. One thing about our grievance society right now, where people feel that they have the right to be that they have a right to be aggrieved, and that their position.
Hang on, people do have a right to be aggrieved. Sorry, people literally do have a right to be aggrieved. Now, whether or not everyone has to buy into their grievance, as she's engaging in the ironclad law of woke projection, projecting all of her grievance nonsense onto all of us, is a different story. But everyone literally does have the right to be aggrieved if they want to be aggrieved. That is your right. Whether or not other people have to listen to you complain endlessly about things that are not their fault is a different thing.
Is it's immutable. Is to say, really, it's. I have a friend who says to me before I have to give a major talk or something, he said, remember, it's not about you. It's about speaking the truth. It's about listening to people and challenging them in a way. And sometimes people look the other way and they walk away. But the other thing that Derek Bell said was, speak the truth. Try to speak it as kindly, and but speak the truth, because none of us will get further if we keep pretending that certain things don't exist. And I think that as I tell white people, I said, and Black people, I guess similarly, is that just speak up. The more you do it, the more you'll find a way to do it that's comfortable for you. And that's very important. You'll find a narrative and language that you find effective. And so that to me is something to do, but don't be shy from it. I have a couple friends who think that only Black people should talk about Black people. And I go like, what? No, that makes no sense whatsoever to me. And this whole thing that I think is talk about being weaponized, this whole discussion about cultural appropriation, they get upset that somebody uses y'all because they think that's a Black Southern thing. Well, I don't get upset with that. I think that's a distortion of the idea of cultural appropriation.
You know what's funny is I don't actually think that this lady is as bought into this stuff as we think she is. I think this is a case of like a liberal lady who is like, I mean, obviously like she's Black, but like I probably don't think that, I honestly don't think that actually has as much to do with it as the fact that she's obviously like a progressive. I think her politics have more to do with this than her skin color, but I actually don't think she's as bought into this as we might think, because she's specifically saying like some of this stuff is silly. So, like a real like woke like pod person is not ever going to acknowledge that some of this stuff is silly. They're just not ever going to do that. And so this is a case of like she's more of like a useful idiot for these people. I don't think that she fully understands what she's doing, and I think that this is actually the majority of people on the left, is like they think that this is what they are required to do to be a good person. Why? Because MSNBC has told them that, because Joy Reid has told them that, because Nicole Wallace has told them that, because of all these like fucking crazy people who are spreading this propaganda. I think that people like this, and this might be a little bit too generous, but I really think that people like this are as much a victim of this entire woke movement as anyone else. And it makes me sad. And you can always tell when it's someone that's like doing it because they think that's what's required to be a good person. Because there's some ideas that come up that they're like, yeah, it's a little crazy. I don't really understand that. But what they don't see is the full breadth of how insane all this stuff is. They're only seeing this stuff in isolation when they're being fed the talking points in really palatable ways.
And so I think that we all just have to be open to the fact, one, that we're trying to all
listen. So it could also be a grift. She's not getting paid for this. I guarantee you, she's not getting paid for this. If she is, it's like a really like minimal fee. It's not even something that's worth grifting over, to be honest. Like a lot of these people, they do this for free, or they do it for really, really small fees. So I wouldn't really say, I think the term grift is like grossly overused.
always deal with
We're not
the
talking about
subject
Robin DiAngelo
in
here.
as effective a way and as inhumane and civil a way as we can. Although sometimes it requires us to say, look, I'm just not going.
Breaking news, House Democrats delay huge social bill plan infrastructure vote. So I guess that's something.
There, it's just something I don't believe. You cannot use that. That language is totally inappropriate, and you know what the kind of language that I'm talking about. And so it's a series.
I got you, Lust Marauder.
It's a series of becoming, but don't be shy about it. I'm sure that whatever you do is correct.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. And Professor Thomas, before you lean in on that question, I'm actually going to invite C. Spares, that's the name I'm seeing, because I think you have another angle on this question about confronting, but particularly.
Side note, in the chat, did you guys hear that the FBI raided Project Veritas's office? That's crazy. And apparently it's over some stupid Biden journal or something. Like it's like ridiculous. It's like over something. It's like obviously like a personal thing with Joe Biden weaponizing the FBI against Project Veritas. We need to expect more of this. This administration is going to weaponize they're going to weaponize the federal government against their political enemies. All of us. Every single one of us.
Really related to legislation. So if you'd like to come off your mic and speak your question to the space, Steve Spears.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Chauncey Spears, actually, and C Spears is what I put on there. I just want to thank you for the space and this time. Just to piggyback on what was been said about the issue of racial literacy. I think that my question speaks to that, because what we find is that the people who are opposing, who are weaponizing critical race theory in our states, are not really, opposing critical race theory. What they're opposing is any kind of intellectual or critical conversation around the impacts of race and racism throughout the history of our country.
Wrong.
And trying to limit that kind of conversation in our public school system.
No. Wrong.
Given the fact that these people are indeed, for lack of a better term, racially illiterate, how can we effectively, counter this in our states to protect, the intellectual discourse that's taking place in our public school classrooms, K through 16 and beyond?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just admit that this that critical race theory, again, is being taught in K through 16 class, apparently? Again, another person. How can we protect these critical conversations from taking place in our K through 12 or 16 classroom? Literally just said it again twice already in this presentation. They're overtly saying this was only a week ago. This presentation was streamed a week ago. So twice already in this presentation, they've overtly said critical race theory is being taught in schools, K through 12 or 16 in this case. That just means college, guys.
I'll jump in. I think Janet was right on the money when she said that in conversations, we have to lead with an argument about the ways in which the anger and the rage, it's not just anger, it's rage, which is erupted, as you all know.
I just want to say thank you to Z over on Odyssey for pre-ordering my book. I appreciate it. I'm not sure when you chatted that in, but I do appreciate it. Guys, if you would like to pre-order my book, Actively Unwoke, it is pinned to the top of the YouTube chats. If you're not watching on YouTube, it will be in the description of the video. The book comes out in April, so we got a long way to go. But the more pre-orders we get in, the better chance I'm going to get an audiobook. So make sure you pre-order the book. If you don't want the hardcover, the ebook will be out for pre-order at some point, and I will let you guys all know when that happens.
In violence throughout this country is misdirected, right? And so it's important, I think, to point out to people that the attack on critical race.
Yeah, so people are asking, are there other sources besides Amazon? There are. I know you can get it through Barnes & Noble. I don't know. There are other sources too. I mean, maybe just Google the title and see what comes up. I'm not exactly sure where they have it right now. But you can definitely get it on Amazon. You can definitely get it on Barnes & Noble. And I'm sure there are some other places too. You'll make the good. Because if there's an audio version, I really don't want to read it. I really don't. I cannot think of anything more awkward than reading your own book. So we'll see. How can you get yours signed? We'll figure that out. Don't you worry. I'm going to try to figure out something to get, even if it's just doing the nameplates that like Dave Rubin does, where he signs a whole bunch of things that you guys can put in the front of the book. I'll try to figure out something like that. Don't worry.
Theory and the kind of panic politics that we've seen in school boards across the country and in school districts around the country is an effort to distract and divert attention from the massive upward distribution of wealth, which has been taking place in this country for many, many, many years now. So I have done a fair amount of talking to the media since this whole debate around critical race theory erupted, including for New Hampshire Public Radio. And I
wish New Hampshire Public Radio had me on instead of this guy. New Hampshire Public Radio was so biased in their reporting on the anti-CRT bill. In fact, they totally set the bill's sponsor up. One day, fucking Laura Kanoy, journalist, set Keith Ammon up one day on her show and like basically sabotaged the entire goddamn thing. He called me right after this interview. He was like, they sabotaged the whole thing. I was like, Keith, that's what they do. If you guys don't know, I used to work at New Hampshire Public Radio back in the day. I orchestrated my own firing from New Hampshire Public Radio when I did my 100,000 sub celebration live stream. I told the story of when I got myself fired from New Hampshire Public Radio. It is an epic story. I have no regrets. They are so biased. They are so ridiculous. That place was so toxic when I was there. Maybe it's different now. I don't know. They've had some opportunities for improvement. But if you want to like scroll through, like you can search it on my YouTube channel. It's like the 100K celebration stream was where I tell the story of this. But I have many thoughts about New Hampshire Public Radio. And by the way, for those of you who didn't see the video that I did the other day, basically saying don't sign anything from your employer if they're trying to fire you over these vaccine mandates. Don't sign anything saying that you're voluntarily resigning. New Hampshire Public Radio tried to get me to do that. They offered me a severance agreement to keep my mouth shut about what was going on there in order to basically, they said, we'll pay you several $1,000s if you sign this piece of paper saying that you will never speak ill of us in public. And I said, go fuck yourself. I'm not signing anything. I'm taking my chances. And it all worked out quite well. And now I can talk shit about New Hampshire Public Radio all day, every day. And it's all true. Not making any of it up. Because they do shit like this. They're extremely biased and they're funded by the flipping taxpayer, and I don't like it.
Always to recall the fact that the Georgia Department of Education passed a resolution attacking critical race theory in the same fiscal year that it was cutting by almost $1 billion the school budget, the public school budget in the state of Georgia.
Good.
And so this culture war is, in my view, a smokescreen, an alibi, right, for the distributive injustices that are being visited upon Georgians of all races, right, who rely on public education in that state. Right?
Dude, you spent like 15 minutes earlier in this presentation talking about how shitty public schools are and how they're not teaching anyone to read and write. And now you're like, well, you know what we need to do to fix this? We need to fund them more. No, the answer if the public schools are fundamentally failing and have been fundamentally failing for decades, what on earth makes you think that giving them more money is the correct way to go? You know what this is? This is like when parents have a kid that refuses to leave the house and they just mooch off the parents until they're like in their like late 20s and they just like keep mooching and mooching. The parents are giving them everything. They're giving them everything they need. They're giving them room and board, they're putting food on the table. Parents are giving this kid everything they need to be successful, and the kid is still fundamentally failing. And you know what the parent says? They don't say, get out of the house, go get a job and start paying your own rent. They don't do that. They say, oh, my sweet little darling, you must need a bigger allowance. Here's some more money so you can sit around on my couch all day and mooch off of me and take advantage of me. Here's some more money for your troubles, and maybe that will result in you going and getting a job. That's exactly what we're doing with the public schools. We're saying, my sweet little darlings, you just must need more money so you can continue to spend more money failing at the exact same thing that you've already been failing at for decades. Makes no sense. If you are truly interested in fixing literacy in this country, you need to defund the public schools. The public schools are causing the problem. The public schools are spending more time teaching children critical race theory and all sorts of other assorted nonsense that they're not teaching them how to read and write.
And I think, in fact, What we need to do is to amplify a critique that is being made by very prominent figures on the right in this country. And that's the critique of racial capitalism, right?
Capitalism, ding,
Tucker
ding, ding.
Carlson,
Tucker Carlson. Da, da,
in
da.
January, I think it was last year, on one of his shows, went into a 15-minute diatribe about the way American capitalism is decimating families in this country and destroying the vibrancy of working class white communities.
No, that didn't happen. I call bullshit. He's saying that Tucker Carlson attacked capitalism for 15 minutes on his show. Bullshit. Clips or it didn't happen. If I'm wrong about this in the chat, someone can correct me. But like, I call bullshit on this. Tucker Carlson did no such thing. That's not something Tucker Carlson would do.
And he blamed both so-called small government conservatives and the bi-coastal liberal elites for ignoring the economic causes of the collapse of the working class that Ann Case and Angus Deaton talk about in Deaths of Despair. Right? And he said that the cultural explanation that conservatives offer about the breakdown
that was
of
probably
the family
it. That was probably it.
Ignores the ways in which the working class has been destroyed by the market fundamentalism of neoliberal capitalism, right? And the massive upward distribution of wealth through things like the 2017 tax reform, so-called, right? So these are Tucker Carlson's words. The idea that families are being crushed by market forces seems never to occur to social conservatives. They refuse to consider it. And that's why I said earlier,
this guy is going to try to convince conservatives that what they really want to do in the world is get rid of capitalism. I'm going to say that argument's not going to get very far.
That unless and until we are willing in this country to talk about economic injustice and rapacious capitalism, right, we're going to see this repeated weaponization of race as a way to divide, right, and distract people who should form a natural democratic constituency, right? And that for me is the challenge. So, in presidential debates, I think Ronald Reagan may have actually invented this.
Did he just say, wait. Did he just basically say, you know what would really help conservatives? If they just became Democrats. Conservatives would have a much better quality of life if they just became Democrats. Did he just really say that? I'm pretty sure that's basically the gist of what he just said. Conservatives would be so much better off in the world if they just became Democrats.
Question. We used to ask, are you better off? Right? During presidential elections, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? I mean, no white working class person honestly considering that question in the wake of, massive unemployment,
I absolutely 100% was better off financially under Donald Trump's presidency than I am under Joe Biden's. 100% every day of the week. Guys, in the chat, were you better off financially under Donald Trump's presidency, or are you better off financially under Joe Biden's presidency? Let me know. Let me know where you stand on this. Because one of the things that really started to turn me around on Trump, to be quite frank, was that I was making a lot of effing money. My business was booming. Until the pandemic, which is the Democrats' fault. Trump didn't want to do that. That was the Democrats' fault. And then everything got fucking shifted. But I was 100% better, making more money than I had ever made in my life under Donald Trump's presidency. Yep, every single person in the chat is saying the same thing. Monica says, my grocery bill was almost $100 more this month because of inflation under Biden. I hear turkey is going to be like expensive. I need to order my turkey for Thanksgiving. Like, I saw a thing that like a turkey that used to cost like $27 is now going to cost $55. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yep, everyone was better off under Trump, dude. Every single person in my chat right now is better off under Trump than they are under Biden.
Industrialization of the United States, the opioid epidemic, the rise in suicide and mortality rates, right? No white working class person can honestly answer that question. Yes. And the Republican Party has a vested interest in not allowing them to ask themselves that question, right? So I think, we sometimes think that it's small of us and amoral, right? To appeal to people's lived material realities, right? But that's
No, they never did. No.
The baseline, and that's the framework from which people see the world, right? And I think we
Holy shit, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look at this. I never had to be so mindful about my grocery budget. A 5-pack of bacon at Costco went from $9 to $22. Wow. Wow. Unreal.
Undermine the possibility of progressive politics when we say, no, we're going to take this off the table. We're not going to talk about economic injustice. We're not going to talk about capitalism and the ways in which
ding, ding, ding.
Actually existing capitalism.
I'm going to get a capitalism button.
Is a project.
I need to create a way. Maybe you guys can help me figure this out because I suck at technology. I have no idea how to do anything. But maybe you guys can help me figure out a way. Maybe I need to do like an overlay or something on StreamYard. I want to have every single time that capitalism is mentioned in one of these presentations, I want to have like a capitalism button where like I hit a button, we go, capitalism. Like I want to have like an animated like, capitalism is our enemy. That's what we want. I want a capitalism button. That's what I want.
Of immiseration and structural vulnerability, right? For working class and poor people, whatever their color, right? And unless and until we have the political courage to begin that conversation, I would say, Carrie, in our interpersonal relationships with people that we know, right, who are living through these insecurities, and say, what you're invited to see as a problem that has to do with race is in fact a problem that has to do with class, right? And you have more in common with working class and poor people of color, even the Black middle class, which is not a middle class in the same way that the white middle class is a middle class. You have more in common with them than you do with Donald Trump and the 1% that Donald Trump represents and whose interests
Reagan, that's a good idea. We can do the dollar sign.
Administration to preserve and protect.
Everyone put a dollar sign in the chat. Like, I bet that there must be a dollar sign emoji. Hang on. Money. There must be a dollar sign emoji in the chat. Like pick out a good emoji for money and put that in the chat if you like capitalism.
I don't really know why we shy away from those kinds of conversations, but I think that
you
race
just use regular
and
number
racial
sign too.
antagonisms,
Yeah,
and
there we go. Lots of dollar signs.
Of race have a long history in this country that has always been tied to preserving the prerogatives of economic elites and the wealthy, people who owe their economic security, not to work, but to the wealth that they've accrued. And I'm repeating myself at this point. Obviously, you can tell this is something about which I feel passionately, but I think as just as a practical political matter, and as a
Obviously, this is something that you can tell about which I feel passionately. That's not how you express passion, dude. But these people have no soul. They don't. They have no soul. They have no life. They have no joy. All they have is destruction. That's it.
an intellectual matter. We need to have the courage of what we say our convictions around racial justice are and around multiracial solidarity are, and address the elephant in our common life, which is class and capitalism.
And Professor Thomas,
Capitalism.
thank you for that.
Ding, 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 ding,
So
ding.
much activity going.
He basically just said it. He literally just said it. Capitalism is the common enemy. Capitalism is the thing that's holding all of us down. If we can just destroy capitalism. That guy actually just gave the best definition of critical race theory that I've ever heard a leftist give, which is that capitalism is the common enemy of everyone. They truly believe that. That's the goal of all of this, is to destroy capitalism. It is about the economic system, because that is how they believe they are going to gain the most power.
Going on in the chat. This is a challenge as a moderator, sort of like how to
But I
balance
just
this.
wanted to say one thing.
Yeah,
about-
go ahead, Dr. Bell, of course.
When you
Yeah.
ask the question, though, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? I would suggest
Someone's alarm
that
is
a
going
lot
off.
of poor white
What is
people
going on?
would say yes. They would totally ignore the economics of their situation, because what they have bought into is the fact that that we are making America great again by this fantasy of what a
First of all, I don't know why this woman can't turn off her alarm, but she is literally saying that poor white people will ignore the fact that they don't have enough money to feed their family in order to buy into Trump's Make America Great Again cult dream. They will fool themselves into thinking that they are really better off when they are not economically better off. Yeah, a lot of people were actually better off economically under Trump. Lots of people. A lot of people. Most people were better off economically under Trump than they are under Biden. And she's literally saying that poor white people are so bought into the dream of the Trump cult that they'll just ignore their bank account. They'll just pretend their bank account has more money in it than it does. Do you think this woman routinely socializes with poor white people? Do you think that this woman has ever had a conversation with a Trump supporter in her life to find out why they actually like Trump? No. They're just making it up. They're just hallucinating their bank account.
a white nation would be for them. So they're willing to, and I've actually seen interviews where people are willing to, quote, sacrifice. Remember the Brexit votes, and in Brexit, people were saying, oh yes, so I may be losing my harbor and my job here on the harbor, but I'm willing to sacrifice for what? They bought into this
because they think they're going to be able to get a better job.
So
why is your alarm
so
going off during a presentation?
And people are afraid because as soon as you start talking,
oh my God,
some
this
of
is
the ways that
annoying.
Professor Thomas was saying,
This is the video, guys.
We call you socialist, but if you use the F word,
I just want it to be clear that the alarm is in the video. It is not my alarm. It is in the video. I just want to be clear. I don't want to get blamed.
Fascism, people get upset. What I'm encouraged about is that news commentators now are talking more about fascism, because they know we're, in some ways, the society is at 1159, and if we want to save it, because they're talking about interest, they're part of this society too, that we have to talk about some of these things, the structural racism, the economy, I call it full frontal fascism that is going on right now. And it's just we have so many issues that are intertwined, but the basic issue is to talk about the economics, the identity of race,
This is like
where we are,
this is like when my husband falls asleep on the couch and he doesn't wake up during his alarm, but I can hear the fucking alarm upstairs in the bed, and his alarm goes off while I still want to be sleeping, and he doesn't hear it, so he doesn't turn it off. And eventually I start yelling downstairs. I'm like, Victor, wake the fuck up and turn your alarm off because I want to go back to bed. This is what this is like. This is so annoying. I am sorry. I am sorry we are all sitting through it. Oh my God.
American image can we help promote, and how can we help promote an American image, an image of an American that's not dependent on white supremacy? That is our challenge.
Dr. Bell, thank you. So this is a nice lead into, I'm going to try something here of inviting two people in to talk about their questions, because I think it's related to you all, the talking about here, whiteness as property, white supremacy culture, which assumes there's something that is other.
It's so
right?
going
there's
on.
an othering here. So I actually want to I'm going to invite Chris Walks to bring his question in around anti-Blackness, and then LW Lee to bring your perspective in around it's not white or Black, and it's we've got things in between to understand as well. So Chris, if you could do your question, and then Ms. Lee, your question, and then I think that might be our last full question as we begin to move into the end of this session. So Chris Walks, if you're there.
Sure. My apologies, everyone. My connection's a bit weak after the storm, but I'm trying to hang in there. But my question is, and was related to that discussion earlier about the linkage between citizenship, literacy, and democracy. And I find that to be such an important discussion, because even if we're going to sort of think about historicizing critical race theory, but also Black people's learning, we have to think about the embattled grounds in which it started with, right? During the period of enslavement, during the transatlantic slave trade, in which the laws in many Southern states literally said it was a crime for Black people to learn, right? And so that as a sort of structuring antagonism of Black people's learning, but also to shape the confines.
When were those laws changed? What year were those laws changed? And are Black people able to learn? Because I mean, I think he's talking about when schools are still segregated, which frankly, technically, if we're being honest about it, and I'm not making an argument for segregating schools at all, even though critical race theorists believe in segregation, I do not. But it's not as though they outlawed your ability to learn. They were messing around with the schools, which was wrong and which was corrected, and which is a sign of progress. But are there any laws on the books that still exist today about Black people not being able to learn? Is he going to be able to point one out? Because we have yet to hear a single law pointed out that is currently on the books today.
Of citizenship and democratic participation as well. And so I always see this as sort of a long structuring antagonism.
Like even she's annoyed. She's annoyed
whether
too.
We're thinking about here or in England or in the Netherlands. And so I'm curious if either of you are able to speak to the specificity of anti-Blackness.
Wow. Okay, and then Chris, we're gonna hold that question, and then Ms. Lee, let's bring your question in and see how we do addressing both together.
Okay, so I'm Asian American, and I just want to point out the fact that racism in this country, and for that matter, racism in the entire world, is not just simply a Black and white issue. There are a lot of people, myself included, that do not.
Little does she know that these people only use Asians when it's politically convenient. These people only care about Asians when it is politically convenient for them to do so. Asians are typically on the bottom of the oppression hierarchy. These people have absolutely no problem with elite colleges and universities actively discriminating against Asian Americans in their admissions process, holding them to higher standards than every other group, including white people. They have no problem with that, but they will use Asians so quickly when it is politically convenient. The problem is that the Chinese immigrants specifically know exactly what communism looks like. They're like, we don't want that here. So the Asian parents are actually some of the most fierce fighters in the unwoke war. Asian American parents, that is like the Chinese immigrants specifically, do not like critical race theory, not in any little bit. They have been organizing more than almost any other group to fight back against it. If we win the anti-CRT war, it will be in no small part because of the Chinese immigrants who understand exactly what communism looks like.
Identify myself as either black or white, and we play a role in this country. Either, I am closer to the white. I am not black, and in that context, we play a role, a very strange role, of both discriminating and being discriminated on.
Oh, she's actually calling herself an oppressor.
All this conversation, both for this country as well as for the world, we should expand it to look at racism as something that should not exist, regardless of what is your color and who you identify with. Because if we don't do that, people who are neither black or white in this country would say, oh, that's not my issue. No, it is our issue. We are contributing to the racism in this country, knowingly or unknowingly. We need to bring all of these people into the conversation that it is our issue, so that we expand the conversation and work towards a solution. And I'm appealing to the two doctors to see how we could really get people who do not necessarily identify themselves as either black or white to embrace this, to work towards solution, rather than just sitting on the sideline and play one against the other.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So we're trying to address, like, where does anti-blackness fit in your perspectives, and then how we understand the role of those who don't identify or not, who are not identified as black or white, right? Because that's also important here in the United States. It may not be what you identify as, but how you are also read. So who would like to try to go at that first?
I think the two questions are connected, so I'll try to address them. So I think the question of anti-Black racism, or the specificity of anti-Black racism in the United States, is an important one, not least for historical reasons. And by that, I mean simply the ways in which race and racism as ideologies, because that's what they are. Race is not a biological fact. There's no such thing, biologically speaking, as a Black person or a white person.
Race is not a biological fact. Then why is your skin darker than mine? Race is just a social construct that we've invented.
Or an Asian person, right? These are social constructions. We make people up using these ideas. And sometimes categories that aren't even about.
Isn't it funny that this guy, and he did say this earlier in the presentation, railed against people who say that they're colorblind, that they don't see race? And then he's like, race is just a social construct. I don't even know what you're talking about. It has no basis in biology at all. So the idea of colorblindness being a bad thing, that you don't see race, which again, I don't think that's a good term. I think we should be using the term color indifference. I can plainly see that this guy's Black. It's not going to change the way that I treat him. But he was railing on the fact that, like, conservatives, they say they're colorblind, and that's obviously untrue. And then in the same presentation, like an hour later, he's like, race is not a biological reality at all. It is simply a social construct. Those are two contradictory statements. It depends on what suits him at any given time.
Out race, in a biological sense, get put to work as part of what Michael Omi and Howard Winnett call racialization. So we see, for example, in the Middle East, the ways in which religion, right, being Muslim, gets constructed and put to use in ways that are remarkably similar to the ways in which race gets operationalized here in the US. And the same is true for ethnicity. 2 weeks before the 1954 decision in Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court decided a case called Hernandez versus Texas, which challenged the exclusion of Latinx people from service on grand and trial juries. And in an extraordinary opinion, Chief Justice Warren pointed out that the racism forbidden by the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution is not about identity, it's about attitudes and acts, how people are treated. And therefore, even though Mexican Americans in the Texas community that was denying Mexican Americans the right to serve on juries were deemed to be racially white, they could still be the targets of racism. Right? And I think that is connected to
well, how nice of
the
you.
challenge that L.W. Lee invites us to take on of breaking out of the black-white binary, even as we realize that anti-Black racism is foundational to all racisms, and as we realize that anti-Black racism, as it was developed in the United States, did a long test run.
By the way, you guys know how I rail on the people who say CRT is anti-white because they're white identitarians? They love it. They love it when the intellectuals frame racism as anti-Black. They love it because it helps them. These people are two sides of the same coin with literal racists. The anti-white people love it when people like this use anti-Black racism. They actually will clip stuff like this and they'll use it to further getting their anti-white language into the culture. I've seen them do it. I've watched them do it. They love this crap. Muhammad says, it's so much of a social construct that it's a factor in whether organ transplants will take place. The irony here is that failing to acknowledge that actually hurts people of color. Yep, Muhammad, right on the money. Racism is just racism, guys. We don't need to be specifying it. Like, racism is racism is racism. White people don't need their little special brand of racism. Black people don't need their special little brand of racism. Racism is just racism. If we truly believe in a color indifferent society, which is one in which we absolutely see people's race, because we do not believe that race is a social construct, but we don't treat people differently based on their race, then the word racism is encompassing of all different forms of racism. It's all we need. We don't need anything else. It already does the job.
In Europe itself, my last trip before the pandemic started was to Ireland, and I was struck at the ways in which the British colonial project in Ireland racialized Irish people. Right? That's why we have a book called How the Irish Became White. So I think this question of the interconnections.
How the Irish became white. Well, you know what's funny about that is, like, they're actually backtracking on this now. Now they're saying that Irish people are oppressed. They're starting to. They're same with Italians. They're starting to do it with both Irish and Italians. Irish and Italians, like 2 years ago, were both considered white by these people. Specifically, Robin DiAngelo writes about this. But now people are starting to backtrack and consider them to be oppressed classes.
Or the articulation of race and ethnicity is crucial. In the UK, the anti-racist coalition that was formed among people of African descent and people of Asian descent led to a practice whereby progressive Asian people call themselves Black. Why? Because they realized that Black in that context was not about blood or hair texture or skin color.
Are you telling me, critical race theory scholar, that how you identify has nothing to do with your actual skin color or physical features? Is that what we're saying right now? I think it is.
Black was a political location, right?
Black is a political location.
Among Asians and Black people in the UK also has antecedents in
this is exactly right. Black is a political identity. That is exactly the point. Why? Because critical race theory is not about race. Critical race theory is about power, specifically political power. And that's why black is not about your skin color or your hair or any of these things. According to him, black is a political identity, just like white is a political identity. That's why Joe Biden can say, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Because black has nothing to do with the color of your skin when it comes from critical race theorists. It only has to do with your political identity.
U.S. Frederick Douglass famously was one of the few public figures in the United States who opposed the exclusion of people of Chinese descent from citizenship, right? And there are myriad instances from the 19th century through the American-Filipino Wars, through the concentration camps during World War II, to the collaborations between people like Grace Lee Boggs and others with Malcolm X of solidarity between Asians and Black Americans right here in the United States. I did a panel just last week with Professor Jennifer Lee of the Sociology Department called Linked Fates, Linked Futures on African American and Asian American relations. So I think it is critically important that we see these issues both in the United States and globally across the so-called color line and in ways that enlarge our vision, even as we remain mindful of the ways in which anti-Black racism, for example, goes some way toward explaining why it is that new immigrants in particular from Asia, and not just Asia, but from other parts of the United States, they may know that they're not white, but they certainly don't want to be Black, right? And the construction of things like the model minority narrative, et cetera, are all part of a...
If Black is just a political identity, then why wouldn't they want to be Black? If Black is just a political identity, then why does anyone have a problem with transracial people like Rachel Dolezal? Who I frankly... Like, I actually feel sorry for Rachel Dolezal at this point, to be honest. It's like Rachel Dolezal was like ahead of her time. Rachel Dolezal, if she just waited like a couple years, may have had a moment. Because really, it's just like, this is just what she likes. And it's really sad that she can't get a job because this is just like what she likes, you know? I don't know.
Racial project.
Maybe should I invite Rachel Dolezal to come on my channel to have a conversation? I kind of want to. Should I do that? Do you guys think that that's a good idea? Let me know in the chat.
In which people are positioning themselves in relationship to the fundamental realities of anti-Black racism in the United States and the ways in which, inequality and social exclusion have been over-identified, right, and over-distributed, if you will, among Black Americans in ways that, people in immigrant communities and Americans who of color who are not Black are quite aware of, right? Are quite aware of, and that I think is going to be a real challenge, building coalitions across social differences that have been exploited to create antagonisms among people of color, both ideological and political. Again, it has to do with the ways in which people imagine themselves. And so what we have here is a failure of imagination when we are unwilling or unable to see the linked fates on which our linked future rests.
He didn't answer the question. That's all right.
Beautiful. Dr. Bell, we will give you the last words here as we start to move towards wrapping up our circle.
Well, I think Kendall Thomas really gave the last word. The only thing I would say is a short anecdote.
Is that alarm
years ago at the
still
National Urban League
going?
Who was Caribbean?
Hang on.
And bought into...
How is it possible that this alarm is still going? She couldn't have got out of her chair and shut off the goddamn alarm. Oh my God. That was like an 18-minute answer from that guy. That alarm's been going this entire time.
To this concept, well, the way she stated is that Caribbean, Black Caribbean people were better than Black Americans because they were never enslaved. And I did what? I said, you missed the sugar and trade and tobacco. I mean, it was astounding to me that someone could actually make that statement and be working for the National Urban League. And but it was the image she had of herself. And I was there during the time when people were trying to figure out what we would call ourselves. As a friend of mine said, we've been colored, we've been Negro, we've been Black, we've been African American, and we've been called a whole lot worse than that. Speaking of Black folks, and that goes with other people of color. So what we have to do is really embrace all of our humanity. And that's none of this is easy. No one said it was going to be easy, but that is the hope, that there are people who are talking about it, who know about it, and who are not willing to give up, who will continue to walk in prayer, who will continue to walk in hope. So thank you for this opportunity to speak, and thank you for the privilege of sitting with you, Tammy, and with Kendall Thomas. What an honor.
Well, Dr. Bell, thank you. And you answered the last question I was going to pose to both of you around hope. And so, Professor Thomas, I look to you. You've been talking deeply around.
I bet they wouldn't have felt so hopeful after Election Day.
Coalitions across social difference, the failure of imagination. Where else can we ground in for hope in this moment?
Well, I personally believe that the arts and humanities are important sites for building a culture of hope, because again, I'll mention Stuart Hall, the late great Stuart Hall, who famously said that we can say, and I would offer a friendly amendment, we can say and do things in and through the arts that can't be said or done in any other way. And I'll end with a personal anecdote. Janet mentioned earlier that I was the last person to be with Derek in his mortal body. And what she didn't say was that during the 5 days before that, Derek's hospital room became the site of an endless succession of procession of people singing and making music, because Derek wrote an important book called Gospel Choirs. And I used to travel around with Derek. He would read from the book and I would sing. And what I was able to learn through that experience was something that I forgot as a law professor. And that was that the basis of any contribution I can make to my students or to scholarship or to the public discourse has to be rooted in my exercise of my right and of my ethical obligation to live an integrated life. And so I would like to see us, we've seen massive cuts in this country to an already woefully small national budget dedicated to the arts and humanities. But I was recently at the New York premiere at the Metropolitan Opera of Terence Blanchard's opera, Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And I was overwhelmed to really be witness to the ways in which that learning community, which had come to be entertained, was transformed by the experience of listening to this music and watching this dramatized story in musical theater of the journalist Charles Blow. So I think that my colleague Susan Sturm at Columbia Law School works on a methodology that they've been calling theater of change, in which they take the arts and humanities into communities as a way to bring people into difficult conversations. So I would challenge the Global Citizen Circle and each of you individually in the circles of which you are a part to try to find opportunities to use music, poetry, novels, right, as a way to build trust, because that's what we need.
You know, I'm gonna have to agree with him. Not in that I want woke art being created because, you know, whatever. But I do think that art is an extremely powerful and frankly really underutilized weapon in the unwoke movement, in the anti-CRT movement. I think that we need to start doing more around art and culture. Politics is downstream from culture. You get the result at the ballot box that you want when you change the culture. And I do not believe that any law is going to do the job. We can pass as many anti-CRT laws as you want. They'll just change the name to something else and change how they're implementing it. It is not the end solution. It is simply a stopgap. James Lindsay calls it throwing sand in their gears. You make it harder for them to exist. You make it harder for them to implement their strategy. It doesn't mean they don't do it. It just means that you've stopped them or slowed them down. That's what laws do. That's what elections do. If you want to really change things, you have to change the culture. And if you want to change the culture, you have to engage in art. Make art. Be creative. And I know that conservatives especially don't like to hear this because they don't like emotions because they're all squishy. But if you want to change people, you need to tap into their emotions. Tapping into people's emotions is the only way to really change things because the human brain makes decisions emotionally and justifies it rationally. If you want to change our culture, if you want to change the political landscape, if you want to beat back all the woke nonsense, you have to start creating art. You have to tap into people's emotions. And then do it over and over and over and over and over again consistently. Show up every single day and do just a little thing. Do it when you don't feel like it. Do it when you don't want to be judged for your creativity. I'm thinking about, I've got like a couple like art projects in the works that I'm honestly really nervous about because I think they're good, but I've never been someone that put my art public. But I think that art can change the world, and I think that we should be using it to our best advantage. So if you're an artist, start creating art. Start creating music, paint, knit. Create beautiful pictures. Do things to fight back in that way, and that's how you win.
There's a trust deficit in this country. And then from there, to begin having some of these hard conversations. So you see, we ended up in a place that has nothing to do with law. And for that, I am glad because, and this will be my final word, these issues I do not think can be solved principally by relying on the language of law and policy at all, right? Because the problem, the soul sickness, as Derek would say, the soul sickness that has brought us where we are is one that I think fundamentally has to appeal to the common shared humanity of us all.
Is it possible that you might sing something?
Oh my God.
I knew Janet was going to do that.
Well, you should have been prepared.
Yeah. Sure. Here's a little snippet of something.
I just happened to be next to my keyboard.
We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives.
Ashe and amen. Thank you both for pouring into all of us, into this global community today. I am so moved and stirred, and there are all these comments thanking you for the hope and the words. I mean, I'm just really so moved. So I just thank you both for sharing your wisdom, your grace, and this space with us. Theo, I'll give it to you for any closing words.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I don't know how I can thank all of you enough. Tammy, for your...
There's still 15 minutes left in this video, so I don't know what she's going to talk about, but I guess we'll find out. It's going to be about 6 o'clock. I need to wrap it up in probably about 25 minutes. So we'll see what she's talking about. If it's nothing important, we can end the call, or end the stream rather, but we'll see what she's got to say. Who knows?
Your mastery with moderating this conversation that has so many more questions, so many more comments that could have come, but I know people have to leave, and but we want to continue these conversations, and we will continue them, and we will with Global Citizen Circle and with others in your own circles. We will be sending everybody a copy of the recording of this program, as well as the many chat questions and comments that have come in. And I want to thank Phoebe, our Deputy Director of Global Citizen Circle, for putting so many wonderful resources that join us for conversation.
Producing a new podcast we're calling CRT2.
Okay, he's basically just marketing at this point. So I think that we can stop the presentation for today. That didn't have as many, I'm going to be honest, it didn't have as many buzzwords as I was hoping that it would have, but that's all right. I do have another I've got a couple presentations in the hopper. Another presentation that I want to watch next week, I think, is all about like a critical race theorist talking about why would we even teach white people's history. I think that'll be pretty fun. But guys, I hope you enjoyed the stream today. I think it was a really good one, honestly. Like, that guy gave away so many, like he said the quiet part out loud like so many times, and I definitely want to get a capitalism button. Tia almost got 2 bingos. That's pretty great. All right, guys, just as a reminder, if you enjoyed the stream today, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel on whatever platform you're watching on, whether you're watching on my primary YouTube channel, my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke, which this will be moving, Happy Hour will be moving exclusively over to Actively Unwoke next year, but I'm doing it on both for now, just to have an archive on Actively Unwoke. So you can watch it here for now if you're on my main YouTube channel. I'm also on Odyssey. I'm also on Rockfin. Please make sure you're supporting the alt tech websites. Make sure you're subscribing on there, watching on there when you can. And of course, please make sure you join my locals community. It's scrolling by in the ticker. It's kb.locals.com. But if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best thing you can do is to become a supporting member on Locals. And what that does is it unlocks all the features of the website. So you can join Locals for free, and that'll get you in, and you can lurk and you can see what's going on. But if you want to get 2 Zoom calls a week, if you want to get book club, if you want to get our Stitch and Bitch, which we call Bitchcraft, you have to sign up as a supporting member. I also do member exclusive posts. We do live streams, stuff like that. Please, you're also going to get access to the community Discord. I'll be posting the community Discord link into Locals if you haven't joined it yet. But please make sure you join kb.locals.com/support. Monthly fee for $5. You can give more if you want, but you don't have to. Annual fee for $50 if you want to get 2 months for free, or you can make a one-time gift, and all those are good enough for me. And also, please make sure. Oh no, I don't have the book up. Oh, hang on. Also, please make sure that you pre-order my book, Actively Unwoke. It's on sale on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and maybe some other places too. It's the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. It will be out next year, but you can pre-order it now, and every pre-order gets me closer to doing an audiobook. I don't really want to read the audiobook. I hope they get someone else, but I really think that you guys are going to love it. I had so much fun writing this book. It was also a little like I pulled some hair out at the same time, but I'm really glad that it's starting to get out in the world. I'm very proud of the book. So please make sure you pre-order it. The link is in the chat or in the description to the video, depending on which you are watching on. Julie says, is Discord free? Discord is free, but you have to be a supporting member in my locals in order to get access to it. So technically it's free, but I keep mine supporter only just because it keeps it nicer. But guys, I hope you enjoyed the stream today. I do these every Friday at 3 p.m. I will see you next week. I'm going out to dinner tonight to have steak. Sour kiwi, I am not going to Buckley's. Buckley's is actually like down the street from my house. I can basically throw a rock and hit Buckley's. I'm going to the Chop House in Manchester, which I find to be far superior to Buckley's. The Chop House has like the best mushrooms in the world. They're so good. We have reservations. I'm really excited about the Chop House night because it is the 10th anniversary of my marriage with my husband. And so I will be going and celebrating with him for the rest of the evening. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon.